The Historic Preservation and Architectural Review Board of the Village of Cooperstown to order. At 5, did the clock chime?
Ding.
5:01. And still 5. It's still 5.
Straight up.
Looks like the hand is moving. Okay. So there are no public hearings on the agenda. So regular item number 1 is 1 Chestnut Street. Is Beth Wade here? Okay. Anybody regarding 1 Chestnut Street? Okay. Then we'll go to 1 Beaver Street, folks. Come on up.
So we did review the recommendations from last time. I sent Chris all the information of what it could possibly look like. We've been investigating it since last month and have found that to do the revised design as requested, it would be significantly more structural work and significantly more money, which is not really something that we can afford to do this time. So we're requesting that we stick with the original design as proposed and move forward with that.
That's too bad because I think we all really like the new design. Good job. Thank you for
I wasn't
responding.
opposed to, once we, looked at it, I wasn't opposed to the look of it. But yeah, it's going to be significantly more work and financial resources, unfortunately.
Yeah, asked her. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Go ahead.
Good.
After you.
Can I ask what the nature of the structural work is going to be and why it's so costly?
Given the increased size and loads of having one large continuous wall in front of that house, the advice from the engineers was that it was going to cause them to have to try to introduce some things like some steel frames that would align underneath the wall to try to carry that load, other things like that that are not very typically found in a structure of this size. That was also compounded by the existing geometry of the existing house, having several loads of structural force resolving near that corner, and just the added weight of one large continuous roof would just add to those loads already and just make it more challenging and more costly.
So you managed, with the 3 dormers, you managed to spread the load to other parts of the structure?
It's reduced, yeah, so it's a little more manageable and doable with more conventional framing methods.
When you say the corner, do you mean the front?
Yeah, the front corner of the existing house, our addition is coming up here. There's a front corner there and an inside corner on the smaller portion of the existing house. And their analysis of all the forces has that being a pretty complicated area for resolving those loads.
Pat, did you have any follow-up questions?
Can I make a statement, and that is that I want to stress that we didn't request that change. In other words, it was talked about as a concept. You made the change, we loved it, but it's not our position to be asking you to do things for a client that you have. Are you happy with the results?
I am.
We like the dormer.
Yeah.
We like the original dormer look too.
Okay.
Is it possible, this is just a question, I think, and I have this as a correction to the minutes for later, I think we talked about the shed style on the dormer because there are no gables facing the street. And it fit better with the original, like with the appearance of the existing structure to have the shed style of dormer as opposed to the gable dormer. Is it possible to apply the shed roof to the 3 little gables? Or is that not feasible either?
It would, it'd be a little bit out of my wheelhouse, I have to consult with the engineer on that.
Okay.
But, both designs can be, examined.
Can do anything for
Yeah,
the right amount of
well,
money,
it
right?
Yeah,
also
you
matters-
absolutely can, but, you know, it's a significant cost.
May I ask what the function of the dormers is? What are you achieving by having the dormers at all?
It increases the square footage of some of the new renovated upstairs rooms and provides daylight into those rooms as well.
Is the issue with the, figuring out the weight bearing based on the line of the face of the dormer, the shed dormer, or even these dormers, being set back from the wall, the front wall of the building? Or would it normally be built to carry the weight?
Yeah, my understanding is that if it is constructed as one continuous wall that faces the street front, the methods by which they carry that load and brace that load gets more complicated than the 3 numbers.
Because it would seem that the wall on the first floor would seem to be ready to function to carry the weight, whereas set back in the roof, I can see there being complications with, you know, how do you support that as opposed to having the wall directly below the other wall. Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is that it's set back as opposed to being in line with the front. I mean, I'm not sure what that would look like, but I'm just saying that if it was in line with the front, that might be.
It may, I think it would also make the frontage a bit more massive and less broken up than try that approach. So that's why the dormers were set back.
But then again, it may also mimic, for lack of a better word, the existing structure, the old structure, in that it has that more massive face on it. You know what I mean? It's sort of like the existing, the old part of the building.
You're talking about having a shed roof that it comes all the way to the front wall.
Yeah, so it looked kind of like the existing. But I don't know what it would look like, and, you know, just throwing it out there that it seems it would be a lot more complicated to try and build dormers mid-roof where there isn't a support underneath it as opposed to coming out front with it.
There is some existing substantial exterior framing that exists near that plane now, given the existing exterior wall. So it's not as though there is no framing there, but it would require some reinforcing to bear the additional load. So there is some framing there now that helps to carry it in its current position. It's a little more set back.
Jay, do you have any questions?
Yes, the building adjacent from the street view to the right. That's owned by Bassett et al. Also.
Jason,
Are you, the separate building, the stone building to the right of it, is that what you're talking about?
The property
Yes,
that
Bassett Hall.
goes down in the corner of Susquehanna.
yes,
Yep.
yes, that's specified.
And that's got how many gable dormers on it?
A lot.
Yes, sir.
I
More than that.
Oh, yeah.
More than a lot?
I want to say there's over 100 windows
They had a sale on gable dormers when.
All right.
All right.
Put that together. I had another,
Go ahead,
question about the, if it's the size of the dormer that creates the problem with the load, would a smaller dormer be something that at some critical point work in terms of being similar to the existing, load of the 3 dormers? Or, I mean, I assume there's, at some point, the load would get small enough with a smaller dormer, shed roof type dormer, that it would be feasible to carry that load.
It's, again, I can sure examine it along with the engineers we have on contract and just check the numbers of it all. But the way it's broken up now, it's trying to be in relation to the renovated windows beneath it, the door below it as well.
Right.
And it also relates pretty well centered on the new rooms above. If you were to say, push them together a bit into one larger dormer, it would, change that relationship, and then it would also kind of have to adjust at least 2 of the windows in the layout of the floor plan.
Dave, I know you're recusing yourself from the decision. Did you have any questions related to this project?
I do not. For the rooms that are on that floor, it seems to me it would really be impossible to, on one hand, shrink the dormer and do what you're hoping to do for those 3 rooms.
Did you have something additional to say, Erin?
I do not, but I wonder if we can make a motion with an attached request.
I was considering a similar approach. Before you do that, I'll make sure the discussion is over, and then Erin can kind of articulate the request she's thinking of, and I'll see if I can add to it.
Sure.
Any other comments before we, Bernie?
Without knowing what it would look like, the idea of going with 2 dormers as opposed to 3, and also in terms of its, as David mentioned, the use for the 2 sick rooms and the office and getting light into them. I'm not sure how that would work out, but as well, that might be an option in terms of making it less busy with the 3 dormers. I think that was part of just the aesthetic that threw off the match with the older part was the busyness of the 3 dormers. So if you do think on alternatives, then 2 dormers might also work in terms of bringing down the busyness of the 3 dormer.
Erin, what are you thinking?
I wanted to, this is not a motion, I'm just talking about making a motion.
We're thinking out loud.
So I'd like to essentially make a motion to approve the project with the request that you explore the option of keeping the 3 dormers, but with a shed roof instead of a gable roof. And let us know if that
3
works.
independent dormers.
Yeah, 3 independent, like same exact plan, different roof line for the dormers. But 3 dormers instead of 1.
If that doesn't create the weight issue that the solid shed roof does. And my recommendation was going to be, you're looking for an approval for everything you've presented, because you want to move forward with this. that we do something similar. Make a motion, have the board vote regarding the entire project with the understanding that you'll consider returning with a design that responds to the question of whether it's feasible to create that shed roof on 3 independent dormers as opposed to the gable facing the street roof. I will say that I disagree with Bernie, that I think that third dormer and the balance it creates in terms of the 3 windows over the 2 windows in the doorway is important in the way you've presented it. I would, if you're willing and able to, give us explore and give us a design that considers the 3 separate dormers with a shed roof. Put a vote out there to the board. Pat?
Do I understand that the mass of that particular roof is what's bothering people, because it's what's bothering me? And what I'm wondering is, are your windows that are in the dormers the same size, same height as the windows in the building around it?
They're at a slightly different height than the main building. They're as close as can be done. There is an existing split level on the second level. So there's a little difference there, but they're very close to the same. The idea is to try to maintain that line of visual force across the street front as much as we can.
Is it possible that smaller windows might, on the second story, give you a relationship that works better for you?
Yeah, we can explore a different size window. We just want to make sure that we're not raising it up too high so that, there's no view or light for the smaller children inside that might be running around. We can definitely explore it.
Are you suggesting smaller dormers? Or are you thinking smaller dormers as well as windows?
Yeah. It's fairly standard practice to have smaller windows on the second story as opposed to the first. But in this particular case, they kind of overwhelm the lower structure.
It makes sense to me. I just want to clarify whether you're talking smaller windows as well as smaller dormers.
I'm talking about smaller windows followed by a reduction in the size,
That's-
especially the height of the dormers.
Yes, that's, thank you for clarifying that. I think that would potentially be something that might work in terms of reducing that above area. But I know personally, it's hard for me to say whether I think that a shed roof or on 3 separate dormers would actually work without having some sort of a picture of it. It's hard. I'm not really good at imagining things.
Well, and that's the, allowing them to move forward with the project overall. Well, I would guess that this is a smaller piece of the bigger picture, coming back with another potential design for the dormers themselves. But I do think, Pat, that could, looking at some of the more traditional architecture with the smaller dormer.
I'm not trying to tell them how to do it. I'm saying that
But referring
if
to
the
that.
mass is the problem, can you reduce the size of the mass?
I want to be a little bit careful because those windows are in childcare areas, at least 2 of them, right, I think? And that's important also, from that perspective, so I want to be careful with changing the size of those windows.
You're talking sleep days.
Yes.
Reducing the size of the dormer may also reduce what can be, it will reduce the usable space
Right.
as well.
And if you want us to look at the shed roof over the dormers, we will do that. We can absolutely do that. We will have our design team take a look at it.
And I noticed, and this is very small in terms of details, but it's interesting because visually it might be another thing that's throwing us off. is the shed roof design presents the dormers with the windows, excuse me, with shutters, and the dormer design presents the windows without shutters, and would the massing seem different if those windows had shutters? And that's just me thinking out loud too. So is that a compromise the board is willing to consider in making a motion to ask for maybe another round of dormer window design on that second floor of the left-hand half of the building, but allow them to move forward with the rest of the structure? People comfortable with a motion like that? So would somebody like to make that motion?
I do, is the motion that they can go ahead with the dormers the way they are, but look into alternate designs, or is it go ahead with the project, we're still working on dormers?
Go ahead with the project, but ask them to consider coming back to us next month with response to some of our questions regarding the dormers. And with a design that responds to some of this discussion.
Sounds good.
Could we see the structure at that point?
The structure, the
What's holding it up?
So we did, in our email, they sent us some drawings in email.
Sorry,
okay.
I'll look at it.
Do we have those here, Christian? Not with the, I can put it up on my computer with my pad. If Chris
With the
can't pull it
floor.
up.
Showing the floor plan under the interior floor plan.
Structure.
Here, this is
I'd like to know where the load of the load figure is.
coming over.
Oh, thank you, Aaron.
So this is the explanation about shear walls that don't exist. And so this is the area, so this is Cooper Street here. This is the addition here. So this is this area that is concerning where the two forms of the building meet through, and this shed wall over here. There's too much load that is trying to exist in that corner.
But do you also have the floor plan that was recently sent?
So
I'm not sure if that would
Yep.
help.
this is the
Showing
floor
that.
plan.
Supporting walls.
I think this is from.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Aaron.
I just want to put that right here before I. I was just looking at it. There we go. So this is the second floor plan with, these are the dormers. So this is an office, 2 sick rooms, which are presumably for children who can't go home but can't stay here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna be like a hospital bed sick
Right,
patient,
right,
it's
it's
gonna be, I'm running a fever and I, can't be around the other kids.
So there's three separate.
Yes, there's 3 separate
Sections.
spaces, yep. And I think there are 3 separate spaces on purpose, and they need to stay as 3 separate spaces.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say that we can't finalize our documents to go out to bid until we have a decision made on this.
Okay. I understand. So that doesn't help you.
Yeah, I just wanted, we can't
No,
proceed
I
until we
understand.
have this decision made, so I just wanted to,
So,
I don't want you to think that
no,
you
I
guys
get
can
it.
go proceed with this.
And
because we can't.
an alternative would be to ask the board to consider making a motion and the perspective of coming back for a field change. If the board is at the point where they're willing to consider that, I'll let somebody make a motion. And
What does that mean exactly?
it means that if somebody puts forth a motion and it's voted in favor of by the board for one of the two designs, I would assume, since you're telling us the shed roof is not really feasible because of engineering issues and cost issues, I would assume that somebody might put forth the motion to approve the dormers. However, the request would be if there's a way to soften the design, for example, play with the dimensions a little bit, change the window size a little bit, or, and or add the shutters to kind of integrate it more. And if there is a change, to come back with a field change, but then you would have the drawings to go out to bid with.
Is there, it just seems like a long process, because we were here last month and we looked at we did, what the request was, it wasn't feasible, but I feel like we're doing something different now, and I'm concerned that if we wait a whole another month to talk about this, I can send documents, I don't know, is there any way to get feedback in between? It's just a whole nother month.
The problem is because it's a public meeting, we can't really,
I'm just concerned that next time, what we look at, maybe then you'll have other recommendations.
I understand,
Would we be able to get together and have a look and see if it's something that we feel good about, and then when it comes to the public meeting?
If we can get a quorum of the board together and Chris could notice the meeting, a meeting could happen. And
it is a lot of work.
I understand.
For the team to
I understand.
kind of keep changing, but, looking at this, it is time and money also. So I don't have a problem looking at something, but I'm concerned that it continues to change.
Well, I think that it changed because when we had a proposal, it wasn't feasible to be able to do it, so it wasn't that we were like, that great, you can do that, but we decided on something else. It was that it wasn't feasible to do the alternative, so that makes it more difficult for us.
And I think the design was shared with the board, and the feedback when the design was shared, when you got it to Chris, was very positive. But we can't make a decision or formally have a discussion about it because this is a public board. There are actually laws we have to act by, so we couldn't get together and say that. However, I think that's, if we had known that the design you were presenting was to respond, but it wasn't feasible for you, then we might have been able to give you a little more response. Like, okay, so I guess I hear what you're saying, but hear what we're saying, which is you came in and said, here's the design, but we can't do it. So
I did give that information to Chris.
okay,
Yeah,
if you did, I did. If that was in the email, I apologize. I didn't read it carefully.
Yeah, there were two.
So.
I had sent two other emails throughout the month with the updated information on the structural.
And part of my approach is that I'm very careful not to engage too much in this until we're in the meeting. So I apologize if I missed that in the emails too.
So then it's as proposed.
As proposed.
Is that a motion?
Somebody can make it.
I'll make
I wouldn't even know what to say.
So I move that HPAR provide a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 1 Beaver Street under criteria A? No. Yeah, A. Yeah,
A, 3A.
3A. I think that's the only one that I can really, that really applies. However, I don't know if that, it would be great if you could come back. So we're approving, the motion is to approve what is here. Every single project that I've ever worked on has field changes. Could come back with a revision to the dormer. That would be excellent. We could approve it as a field change. It would be a, we're hurrying this along for you, if you could come back to us with.
Yeah, to look at the
Some
shed
compromise,
style
right.
roof over the dormers.
Yes, over the 3 dormers.
I have no problem looking at that.
Try to help you get out of here with your
Or to,
approval.
or to respond to the question of could the dimension of that dormer or window change to respond to that massing issue.
As well as pulling the dormer
Okay.
forward so that it's sustained by the front wall as opposed to
Yeah.
relying on the.
But it is, the motion is to approve it as presented at the last meeting. So the design presented at the last meeting, the 3 gable front dormers.
Yes, the design presented at the last meeting, and also, I have to flip to my second page, excuse me. Also criteria 5, which is energy efficiency and other things,
Safety.
accessibility, safety, all that stuff.
Okay.
That was a salad
get
of a
everything?
motion, does it?
Okay. We'll put it in the blender, it's a chopped salad now.
It's a smoothie.
Okay, so Marcia's diligently writing, and do we have a second?
One second.
Thank you, Pat. Any more discussion? Okay, Liz votes yes.
Oh, Aaron, yes, I made a motion, please.
Jay, yes. I abstain.
Bernie, no.
Pat, yes.
Okay, so if we see you again, thank you.
Thank you. So if we are able to make a change or do something different, we have to come back here.
Yes.
You. Field change.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. So we would just request to come back and.
But I'll know you as we get the appropriateness for this design,
Okay.
you can go ahead and work, but if you want to make a change, call me and
I'll let you
talk
know.
about it.
Okay, all right. We will look into, see if that's good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Has anybody come in regarding number 1 Chestnut Street? Okay. Is anybody here regarding 3 Leatherstocking Street?
No, nobody is. but
Right.
I spoke to Albert, he's living in Los
All right,
Angeles,
he's in California.
and,
Shall we
yeah.
push that to the end then? Would that
up to
be
you,
okay?
I want yes to be reviewed.
Yes, we will review that. We won't make our friend, I'm assuming the remaining person other than Mr. Carr is regarding Lakeview Drive South. Are you here regarding that? Would you like to come up and have a seat?
For Lakeview Drive South?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. How are you today?
Good.
Good.
Diana Sesta.
Nice to meet you. Okay. Tell us about the project, Diane.
So in general, what's going on with the project is we have a deteriorated retaining wall that's being replaced and some drainage that's going on in conjunction with it. But because of the retaining wall that's needing to come out, we're going to be putting in some new steps and handrail in the location where we currently have some kind of a step and railing setup that's there now. So I think what we're reviewing for architectural review board tonight is the handrail, is that correct? So on the drawings, we had a couple of options before things went out to bid, just to get options for pricing, both of which were steel handrails. One that was just gonna get a paint and finish, and the second option to just have it galvanized dipped with a powder coating. So the membership has, that is our preferred finish, and
The galvanized dip?
yeah, to put the galvanized dip on it and powder coat it so that it has a longer lifespan and less maintenance.
I did look at that on the computer. Chris, do you have any hard copies?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Marcia. Marcia's sharing, thank you. Do you have a bigger copy, actually, between the computer and the 8x10?
I brought a full-size set.
8.5 by 11, thank you.
And I'll just go to the sheet that shows kind of an enlarged detail of the railing. And it's a standard railing, 1.5 inch steel. So that we have it for safety and for accessibility. So this is just showing an enlarged detail of the handrail that will go along the steps on one side. And there'll be a loop at the top and
But
the
not a
bottom.
loop at, there will be a loop at the
one,
bottom.
yeah, there's gonna be a loop at the top and the bottom with this extension, just.
That's a good idea, to have a loop at the bottom. I
Yep.
had an experience with
Yeah, no, they're
a
just-
non-loop.
Yeah, they're cutting out the detail, but we'll have the loop both at the top and bottom and that extension, so that it's just easier for, and the right distances for people to be able to grab onto it as they clear and top that first section.
Let's take a look.
Thank you.
Okay. So does anybody have any questions about the proposed handrail? Concerns, comments? Okay, would anybody like to make a motion?
I don't have my sheet.
We'll give you a pass.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Jay's
I
good.
move that H-Par provide a certificate of appropriateness for the project at Lakewood Drive South, under criteria 3A and 5. I don't think there's anything historic about
No,
this, so it's the design, character, appropriateness to the property and safety seem
Correct.
to be it, so 3A and 5.
5. Great.
I can second it.
Thank you, Bernie. Any discussion?
Oh, so you're gonna go with the powder, is that?
The powder, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what we've decided on and had approved, so making sure everybody's good with it. This is good news.
We don't generally weigh in on kind of coatings, so we're good.
Okay.
Okay, so Liz votes yes.
David, yes.
We've finished voting, sorry.
Bernie, yes.
Erin, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank
All
you.
right. Good night, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
So, Keith, just in time for our conversation with you. And I will say that if somebody does come in regarding 1 Chestnut, we may ask to, if we're not done, stop and deal with that, which should be pretty quick, and then continue the conversation, if that's okay with you.
It's gonna be a long one.
Well, I'm not sure, but I'm just saying, instead of making somebody sit here, if it is,
That's fine.
if that's okay with you, I think.
That's perfectly reasonable.
Great.
May I recuse myself?
Yes, you may, Pat. Okay. So how are you tonight?
Tired and cold.
Yeah, all of the above, right?
We're gonna have power back, I think, so. I think,
Oh, you guys don't have power.
No, they showed up when I was leaving for here. I actually texted Chris, who's up, and said, hey, it's a little late. We had to make sure we get the truck back out to clear it all. Anyway.
A little dose of winter caught up with everybody.
Good luck with that. Yeah, they got it. They'll see. Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you for putting the materials together that you did, Keith, and for providing them so folks could take time to review them. I first want to see if anybody at the table came in with any specific questions for Keith regarding the materials he submitted. Jay, did you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Aaron, did you?
I just have some questions about, open my note here. Sorry.
It's okay, take your time.
Oh.
Aaron, do you mind if I ask those
No,
questions?
please do.
So we are,
What are we doing here? Is that what the question
Yeah.
is? So, Keith has requested hardship, which means that he was denied a certificate of appropriateness for demolition of the structure. And so he is asking us to consider a hardship application. So he's trying to prove that the structure is, I'll read the incapable, all 3 of these must be proven. The applicant shall establish by documentary evidence that the property is incapable of earning a reasonable return, regardless of whether that return represents the most profitable return possible, and provided that the lack of return is substantial as demonstrated by competent financial evidence, the property cannot be adapted for any other use, whether by the current owner or a purchaser, which would result in a reasonable return, and 3, good faith efforts to find a purchaser interested in acquiring the property and preserving it have failed. That is right from our law, section 326F, hardship criteria for demolition. And so that's not exactly mirroring the state model law, but pretty close to state model preservation law.
and where do we sit in terms of, there was talk of Martin looking at or some Anybody else looking at the?
Well, I think that can be part of our conversation, of somebody else looking at, finish the sentence though, sorry.
That I thought that maybe Martin or somebody was going to sort of decipher the legalese, for lack of a better word, and
I don't know if we've
understand fit.
gotten much more feedback from Martin. Chris, have you heard anything from Martin regarding hardship? So what I did was provide a little more information from the New York State
Okay.
Office of Historic Preservation. Now, these comments are based on the model law, when they wrote this article. So hardship is not considered, that's not considered during a designation process. So hardship is only considered after denial of a specific serious proposal. Also, it is imperative that the process focus on the usability and economic viability of the property in regard to the local preservation ordinance and not the current owner's checkbook. Okay, it might sound hard-hearted, but the only consideration in the case of a demolition or an alteration hardship is the economic impacts of the local law in regard to the use of the property and or economic return. And it's expanded on. The applicant must establish those three criteria, all three of them that I noted. If we don't feel that this information has been adequately met, that's part of the consideration of whether we do or don't feel this information has been adequately provided. So reasonable return is the concept that the key point on which the hardship process turns if the regulatory constraints placed on the property under local law completely blocks the owner from a reasonable return on the property, then that's a consideration. However, the issue that it's not a hard and fast rule, so it's very gray, but the key issue is whether or not the building is capable of generating a reasonable return, not necessarily the current owner in his financial situation. The true issue before us is to ask, do the restrictions placed on the property by the local preservation ordinance prevent the current or any other owner from seeing a reasonable return? Is it important to realize, it's important to realize that under federal law, an owner has no right to the maximum profit possible or the most lucrative use of property, simply a reasonable return. The argument that a local preservation ordinance has impinged upon the full speculative development potential of a property is common in hardship cases, but the owner has a right to a reasonable return and nothing more. So
Once you could break it up into three separate aspects and you'd have to prove all three. So even if it was proved that the reasonable return, then you would go to the other two.
yes, all three have to be proven. So
you're speaking to that model law that's found on the New York State Parks, Recs, and Historic, right?
right.
Okay. I believe Martin said that that's not applicable here because
It's still the same
have to
questions.
follow.
I'm helping them understand what the questions are, which are still the same.
Well, this is
It sounded much different.
This is, but we're talking about 300-26, which is our law.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're just looking at our law.
Right.
That doesn't apply because it's not a law that we have to follow.
but this, I'm not reading a law, I'm reading an explanation of what we have to consider related to this. This was a document put together by the State Historic Preservation Office to help commissions like ours understand how to weigh these three things.
Is it that, what I was given at the last meeting? So this document really isn't an explanation, this is something you can use to build your law, take parts of it or not, because this models it, but it doesn't use everything.
I understand that.
So it really doesn't explain how to interpret it.
That's why I'm reading an article by the State Preservation Office on how to interpret these three criteria, which are the basis of our law and the model law. So, if that's helpful to you.
It was super helpful. Do you mind if I?
Go ahead.
So it seems that from when I was looking over the paperwork earlier, it didn't seem like there were many takers at, I mean, the word reasonable is not, I mean, it's not super clear, but it didn't seem to me that there were a whole lot of takers at the price that it was being offered for, which didn't seem, like, what was the difference between what you paid and what you were trying to sell for?
What I paid was $80,000. Did Chris give you the?
Yeah, I just.
Yeah, it's kind of broken out, but
I don't have it off the top of my
all set
head.
in right now.
There might be a copy
It's
here for you.
120.
Ready to see.
Okay, so we listed it with the real estate agent back when things were a little aggressive. I was like, oh, it's two something, I think you know.
It was 227.9.
Okay, so there's some people that looked at it, and the price wasn't a fact, they had money. And looking at that property, but they're like, we want to tear it down. I met with them, that's what they said. And I offered it personally to other people, and I depending on the mood you're in sometimes, just something, I just want to be done. So I think I wrote in there also, I've offered 130, 150. I offered it to Mr. Yancey when he was looking at it, he wanted to buy the property.
So, no,
You
at
know,
the last
same
meeting,
thing.
you offered to give it to him.
Well, and buy the whole property.
Okay.
He can have the
Yeah,
house.
You can have the house.
So that's what I was referring to when I
Yeah.
said the difference between the 85, how many years ago did you bought it,
In a
130?
couple years, and
Didn't seem.
you know, if you have 120 in, you pay a real estate agent, they get 6% of that. Maybe you want to make a little profit, you know, where is that, 150? Is that unreasonable? I don't think so.
But
130 is definitely not.
after you bought it, you removed materials, which you call a burden. There was a cost to you.
Yes.
But it took away from the value of the structure in
It
terms of.
enhanced it. You walked in that house, it was full of stuff, it was terrible. The first part of this has the letter from Barb Tongue, a neighbor. She walks in, what she says the house was like. That's why I put it in there, just to prove what that condition was in originally, and it needed a lot of work, we knew that.
I think Liz is talking about structural, not the crap.
Yeah, well, the foundation is the same, you know, structurally, it is what it is. We had to remove things like the bushes and stuff to get to the foundation. There was like a room in the basement to get to that. That was the worst part, you couldn't see. That was there, it was pretty, you know, I basically inherited that. So I didn't cause that. It was
But
like
you
that.
knew what you bought.
I knew to an extent.
Well,
If you read the letter, it says you make guesses. You don't, I can't tear a wall apart to see what's behind it until I buy it.
Did you have the property inspected before you bought it?
Yes, I did. There's a letter from Dave Basler.
Can we have a copy of the inspection report? as
You
part of
have
your-
a letter from Dave Basler right here. He came in, he's been doing this for like 60 years.
he was your inspector before you bought it?
Yes, he was. Right
So-
there.
But his letter is not an inspection report.
It's a report from him on what we found. I mean, we can argue over if it's an inspector with what's the report, you know, I mean.
Well, the report is a document that's part of the paper trail of the purchase of this.
This is a document, he signed it. You can ask him.
Can I ask, do you have a mortgage on the house?
No, I don't.
Okay, so you paid cash for it. So a bank did not require an inspection.
No, the bank would not finance that. And I just talked to the bank recently to see if they would finance fixing it. They didn't laugh, but no, they will not. No way, not on its own merit, no way.
I have an additional question about the letter that you included from, where is it in here?
I've got paper if you want it.
I've got it, I made notes of it, I didn't save, but,
The real estate agent, Megan O'Brien.
no, from the engineer.
From John
John
McManus.
Yeah, from John McManus.
Yep, he visited the site, I wasn't there, and he wrote a letter and sent it to me.
Right, so, what he says in his letter is that more than 50% of the structure has been demolished, including interior removal of materials. This condition requires that the entire house be brought up to the existing New York State building code.
Okay.
For me, that seems to say that you went ahead with a lot of demolition without the understanding that doing so would require the property be brought up to code.
That engineering report, I did it to satisfy that question that's been there, more for the foundation. Okay, this is what he wrote. I mean, bringing it up to code, it needed the code. I mean, there's junction boxes in the walls that are open, wires are, it needed everything. And you get to a certain point, what are you gonna do? I didn't buy that to put lipstick on it, make another garbage property in the village. My intention was to make an asset to the village and ourselves. And you know what, it just needed a lot. And I didn't go in there with the intent of tearing it down like a lot of other places do. I did not do that, but it came to the point, it just needs too much. And we can argue about it all day long and disagree, but it needs what these people come in and say, hey, it needed all this from the get-go. How do you argue with that? You weren't there, I was, they wrote a letter and they signed it.
But just to be clear, Mr. Bassler's report, he lists all these problems with it, and so you were aware of the problems.
Yes.
Right, so it wasn't that you opened up the wall and found something. These were known issues.
There was a lot of speculation because you can't open all the walls and see what's behind them. If there's some rot, you start there, there's no insulation, okay,
But the problem wasn't that like a new big problem was discovered behind the walls. The problems that are listed here are like mostly the foundation.
Yeah.
You know, he says the foundation is bad, and that's, you know, $50,000 expense. That's
well, when I went in, I was hoping I needed a partial, but like we opened that, you saw that back corner, the worst corner, you couldn't see that. On the outside, it doesn't look that bad, but you get like, what percentage of the foundation being bad makes it so, like, why would you try to patch it instead of replacing it? You know, talk to Tom Swatland, who does this, he laughed. I wasn't aware that all the block from those years go bad. Those foundations put his kids through college. That's what he told me. I'm like, okay, why try to patch?
What was the college, I'm sorry?
Tom Swatland,
Yeah.
he's fixed a lot of these foundations, so I had him look at it early on, because I wasn't sure what to do, like patch, whatever, and he just laughed. He goes, yeah, these all go from that era, the block is bad, it disintegrates.
Did you get an estimate on the foundation before you bought it? From
No, I did not.
Mr. Bassler?
No.
I also note that Mr. Bassler's report is dated August 2023.
That was when we bought it, when we were buying it.
No, you bought it several years ago.
You didn't buy it 3 months ago.
No, there's two things, okay? So if you look at the 2023, it gives you numbers, like how much it's gonna cost. Early on, there's a letter from Mr. Bassler.
But that's dated August of this year.
Let's see.
I think that's the confusion.
I don't know.
So this, to me, seems like a summary of, because
Seems
it
like
does
that.
say that
Seems
you
like
did an
that.
inspection prior,
Let me see.
there's a pre-purchase inspection, so it seems to me this is a letter that summarizes the inspection report.
Okay, so this is the original one that I photocopied for that for Chris, 8/2/2023. I don't know. If you look, that's in the original application. I don't know if it's the same, I don't know how what that D is doing there.
Can I throw something out? I'm not sure why we're trying to ascertain whether Mr. Parr knew about a bunch of stuff beforehand. Basically the question is whether the structure can be rehabilitated for amount of money that isn't, for lack of a better word, exorbitant. I mean, regardless of whether you knew that the damage or that was existing and how much it would cost, I guess I'm
I guess
not understanding.
we're getting stuck on if Mr. Basler, we do have the right to ask if there was an engineering report and for a copy of it. And Mr. Parr is presenting us with the letter from Mr. Basler, kind of recapping whatever engineering feedback he gave Mr. Parr. So it is fair to ask the applicant, I think, if he got an engineering report and understood some of these problems existed when he purchased the building.
I got
Yeah.
that, but what I'm wondering is, let's say Mr. Parr, and I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but let's say he totally ignored what he was told, and and they were telling him, oh, it's going to cost you way too much. What difference does that make in terms of the future of the building if it costs too much?
You're right, because you're right, Bernie. You're saying that whether it costs him too much or not, is it too much? Is it too much for somebody?
The original owner couldn't sell it, and it would have cost them too much, or they sold it to somebody else and it cost too much.
Would somebody else make that investment? The other consideration is, I understand you've tried to sell this house, and I understand you've tried to sell it for what you paid for it and the work you put into it. But do you have proof of a listing at like 130, like you said?
No, that was verbal.
So that's, again, we need documentation like that,
Well,
like you got offers.
You gotta look at other properties on Delaware, there's
We're talking about-
cases.
we're talking about your
I know, but
property.
we're talking about the same thing, we're talking apples and apples, okay? I can't prove I talked to Chris.
Well, do you have-
I offered to sell to anybody that asks. I can't prove it, I got a tape recorder?
Well, do you have
And that's
written
ridiculous.
offers? Like, I've made a written offer to somebody to purchase a house I live in. I did it for sale by owner, I did a written offer. Did people give you written offers?
No, everybody laughs. It's like, we will tear it down. That's what happens, there's no written, I can't videotape all this. I mean, I've been doing a lot of good faith, even from the last meeting, when we brought stuff to Martin, he kind of settled one issue. That was kind of a good faith effort on my part, because this would have all been done. But it would have been a
We
good
haven't
faith, so
seen
let's just,
good faith efforts to find a purchaser interested in acquiring the property and
how
preserving.
can I prove this? How is it possible to prove if I'm talking to somebody on the street? It's not.
Would you be asking for something like it being listed with a realtor for 130?
It's
For-
ridiculous.
Right.
Totally.
Where there's this, you're talking about the real estate fee.
So are you
of
gonna help
six-
me set the price for what's
No,
reasonable?
I'm just asking
I mean, what is?
that-
What would be reasonable then if I set a price with a real estate agent? What is reasonable? Are we gonna keep going around and around and around? How much? Tell me.
Well,
What do you think is reasonable? Because you're telling me what I said is not.
Relax a little bit, please.
yeah,
Okay, I'm sorry, but this is getting to be a bit much.
no, well,
For everyone.
we're looking at the
Thank you.
law, and one of the aspects is,
Is it possible to get letters from people you talked to, who you said, would you consider 120 or 130, whatever? So those individuals, same way that
I
Barbara,
tried to backtrack and do that, but
it seems to me even to get some of those letters, some of
Are you
those.
suggesting a reverse letter?
No, in terms of that criteria, good faith effort, where you mentioned, not from the 227, but talking with individuals and offering them at 120 or 130, if we could have letters in the same way we've got letters from Bachelor, letters from Barbara Tucker.
how many letters would be needed, you think? You know what I mean? It's just, there's people I don't know. They'll be like, I'll be out there working, they're walking by, oh, check the house out, and I'd say, you wanna buy it? No, and if someone would look, and then no.
we're in a really complicated situation, and I know you are also. We're not trying to be hard on you, but the hardship we need to prove is the hardship on the property. And this is, even though Hubbell's noted it's an inexpensive kid house, it's a really unique example of a kid house in this village. And there are multiple examples of kid houses, so that makes it significant. idea that we need to kind of weigh the fact that you're saying you can't make it work financially doesn't mean somebody else couldn't make it work financially. We need to weigh with some more information how you can say people walk by and you've asked if they want to buy it, but the only thing we've seen is a listing with it $100,000 higher than what you've put into it, plus what a real estate agent's fee would be for selling it. So that does not seem to me.
So is that the only hang-up in this whole thing right now?
I don't think so, but I'm giving you as an example, that's the very concrete thing we can kind of ask you right now. That's the thread we're following right now, which is,
So I talked to Ron Johnson, I don't know if he's
yes,
stated
I
his
read
letter,
that.
Yep, we got
That's an
it.
opinion.
Yep.
but there's more, we had a conversation also, and I was like, hey Ron, can we sell it? Basically, he laughed, no one's gonna buy it, so we're gonna tear it down. I forget his exact words, but it's something to the effect, I don't wanna insult you, but it's just a piece of junk. And he went through his litany of what he thought, and he said he's sold a lot of these properties to these people that are tearing properties down. And he's been selling houses here for a long time. In his opinion, it's
But
not worth anything.
they may be tearing down properties outside of the village, not in the village.
Inside the village. I mean, I can come up with a list of them if you want. Ron offered to come in here, but I don't.
I would.
He's a little wild than I am.
I don't know how far back Mr. Johnson's looking, but I've been on this board for 12 years, and I can think of 5 properties at the most in 12 years.
Okay.
To the point where I said this in an email to the board as we looked at your package and reviewed the law, just reminded everybody to kind of refresh themselves that Chris has never been through a hardship or demolition hardship process, and I don't think anybody else on this board has, except for me, because that's how few we've had in terms of demolitions and hardship petitions. We have had, I think, 5 demolitions in the time I'm on this board, and that might be pressing it, that might be 4. So to be hyperbolic and say everybody's tearing buildings down is not fair to this process, because we have not had 1 demolition a year, and I can't count the number of years it's been since we reviewed a hardship request for demolition either. So we're trying to play fair with you, but I'm asking you to not kind of blow out of proportion the facts, because the facts are, we can compare the other properties that have been torn down, but the issues are different with each property, so we can't compare it to what you're trying to do. But what we can say is, I don't think we've had more than 5 in the last 12 years. So that's an argument that, whether a real estate agent told you that or not, is not factual in the village of Cooperstown in the Historic Preservation District. So I just want to not kind of go all over the place. Let's try to stick with as many facts as possible and make this a fair process.
Do you mind if I say something?
Sure.
So it seems that we have to prove 3 things, and maybe we should find the easiest thing to deal with and work on that. If we can't get that one, then
That's one of the reasons I was kind of looking at the 3rd one, which seemed to me like the easiest thing to say, does this exist? That was why I started with that one. But we can start with number 1 too, which is the property is incapable of earning a reasonable return regardless of whether that return represents the most profitable return possible, and provided that the lack of return is substantial as demonstrated by competent financial evidence.
So it would seem that the way to prove that would be, as Mr. Parr suggested, at what level would it be granted that a reasonable return wouldn't be made on it, and then somehow showed the property, whether, I mean, obviously, and I didn't want to hear this, listed for that amount and see if it sells, but perhaps there are other ways to ascertain that by maybe talking to real estate agents and finding out what their opinion on is on whether something like that would sell.
I think that was what he did with the letters he provided from Ron Johnson and the other agent who sold you the house,
She looked
Megan
at it,
O'Brien?
no, she did not sell, it was a private party purchase.
Uh-huh.
I consulted her to look at it.
But before we get too far down it, would the first step on proving that a reasonable return would be made to figure out what a reasonable return would be, and therefore what a reasonable return wouldn't be, and then that would be the first step.
I don't think we determine that. I think that's the tricky part.
But we have to decide whether the criteria is met or
Is
not.
not, yeah. I
But
don't-
maybe there's one of the three that would be easier. If that's
Right.
difficult, then maybe one of
Right.
the other three would be easier, but thank you.
I am going to let everybody kind of weigh in on this, because I'm as baffled and struggling with it as.
I literally went through possibly going through the three criteria in the material we had. So with the first reasonable return, it seems to me, well, there would be a cost associated with creating a property that then could be rented. And then it's a small house, assuming that it stays pretty much the same, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and, a nice location, but a small house. So I guess, what I was trying to imagine was what would be a rent that would be realistic for that size house in that place, and then comparing that rent to what the cost would be associated not only with bringing it up to speed, and you've got the final summary in terms of what would be involved with the foundation and German Mike and so on, and then think, well, how many years would it take for a reasonable return?
I hear what you're saying, David, and not to throw, I admire your concrete approach, but not to throw too much side into it. But another option would be, in terms of a reasonable return, would be selling it as well as
Well, that would
renting
be,
it. That would be another option.
Right, that would be,
And
so
then-
either continuing to own it and rent it, or to sell it, and then, same issue.
And then
in terms of-
another side thing would be, in terms of renting it, is there a possibility of doing an addition so that you wouldn't be limited to, and once again, I applaud your concrete
And-
solidness, but that might also be able to be increasing the return.
But doing an addition,
So
sort
we
of
did
expands the task, and, I think that,
True.
my inclination would be to take it as it's described, 1,100 square feet. With the cost associated to bring it up to code and to make it something that would be desirable, and then either to think about it if you wanted to continue to own it as an investment and collect the rent, but there'd be maintenance and tax and so on, or to sell it, and then try to do the arithmetic in terms of thinking about whether it's reasonable or not. The income that would be secured versus the expense, and then whether that balance is, how that would be reasonable or not.
Do you mind if I pick your brain on a related subject?
That's sure, whatever
And you can,
synapses are there.
you can decline to comment, but if you, in terms of the other two criteria, it seems you feel that this would be the best one to
Well,
approach.
to me, the second criterion, I think, is the simplest one, that it has to be residential, right?
Right,
So
and
I don't imagine we're gonna,
Yeah.
I don't know
Dunkin'
if,
Donuts.
I don't know if, well, that was gonna be up the street. I don't know if you were on the board, Dave, and you and Pat are the longest standing board members other than me. when we did actually approve an addition to this structure, so there were efficiency kind of units or
Yeah,
small
well, that's-
apartments?
That's exactly what you were saying, the intent, when the first didn't work, but okay, we have to make this work somehow. And, so that's where we put a lot of effort in to improve the property, and develop some plans for an addition on the back, and that was approved. I worked towards that end, I did like the garage was terrible and unsafe, so I did things like that and remove those in preparation to do that, okay? And that's a lot of the site, the drainage has always been a problem, so we addressed that, putting French drains and whatnot. Trying to figure out how to do perimeter drains, unfortunately you can't, because the stormwater drain, the hook up by the sidewalk, I dug that out, I found that, you gotta, call anyone one dig, all that. It's too high, it's too high to, to do a passive, footer drain, so you can't do that. But anyway, so I moved towards that end. In the basement, Chris and Mr. Yancey can attest, I have cribbing down there, I have a bunch of material, I was gonna build the headers and start jacking it up, and I'm trying to talk myself into this, because it doesn't, on paper from my end, because I have to pay for all of this out of my pocket, you can't get financing for this, and we're not rich people. Not financially, but yeah, I just couldn't talk myself into it, and I was approaching that 2-year mark where you can apply for the hardship, and I'm like, I'm just gonna apply for it, because I just can't talk myself into this, it's just that at the end, what it'd be worth and what you gotta put into it don't even come close. And so it makes no logical sense, at least not to me.
So David, I'm still picking. So you say, and I apologize for not having read the criteria better. I was looking at I got obsessed in the details of the cost of getting it together, of rebuilding it. But you say criteria 2, don't even think,
Well, I
don't even worry about it.
interpreted property cannot be adapted for any other use. I interpret that to mean for something other than residential.
I think,
It can be adapted, it can be a multifamily residential, as it was already approved for being a multifamily residential. It doesn't necessarily need to remain a single-family owner-occupied residence.
But generally, we're not thinking that it can be converted into something
You're not gonna put a
other
car
than
wash there.
Yeah.
You're not what?
And to me, that.
You're not gonna put a car wash
No.
there.
It's not going to be converted into a movie theater.
And that,
and the argument that a local preservation ordinance has impinged upon the full speculative development potential of a property is common in hardship cases, and the owner has a right to a reasonable return, nothing more. So the zoning, prevents it from being anything other than a house, but this is the consideration with number 1. Do the restrictions placed on the property by the local preservation ordinance, by our law, prevent the current or any other owner from seeing a reasonable return? So the restrictions we place on it are maintaining the historic character of the building from the street, ideally maintaining original exterior materials. We have already acquiesced to the removal of a chimney to mitigate water damage being caused by issues around that chimney. So we have already acquiesced on some of the historic fabric of that building. So that is kind of the question related to number 1, in terms of the reasonable return. And I know kind of we're all over the map with this, but are the historic preservation laws, not the whole cost of the work, impinging on a reasonable return?
So I want to offer one point of clarification, which is that hardship is that the preservation law is causing undue hardship on this property.
Why is
I
that
think
an
that's
issue?
my understanding.
I've never said that.
But it's
That's-
not your issue, that's the law,
The
that's what
law.
hardship means.
Hardship means that the
Is
preservation.
that, the hardship, is there a definition in the village law that says this? Because that stuff there's a reference, but it's not the law and it doesn't.
Hardship criteria for demolition. An applicant whose certificate of appropriateness for proposed demolition has been denied may apply for relief on the ground of hardship.
Right.
In order to prove the existence of hardship, the applicant shall establish by documentary evidence the 3 criteria we
Right.
spelled out.
I got it.
Okay, so our law does not articulate hardship, but there are state and federal laws that do.
But we follow our law, we don't have to follow anything that says, that's the
That's what you
question.
say.
Well, I know, but I wonder what Martin says, because maybe we ought to put it to him, because I think if you don't have a definition to define the playing field, how do we even?
I think he
figure
would
this out?
refer to established case law to define it. That's what happens. You know,
Okay.
But it would be
because-
nice to know, what do you have to say on it?
And that's why I brought out the state's historic preservation office's interpretation for boards like us in considering hardship. So we can understand the foundation on which hardship has been built related to historic preservation and demolition and alteration. So even though it's not articulated in our law, if we asked Martin, he would refer to established case law, which reflects the state and federal laws and the interpretation of hardship.
Maybe we'll let him determine that, because I'm not a lawyer, I don't think anybody else here is. Because there's precedent set right on Delaware Street, that one there, that's precedence, okay, that's law also. You refer to precedents in cases. So I understand that one and what they did trying to sell it, and it was a song and dance compared to what I've done.
Are you able to talk to Martin?
Excuse me?
Are you able to talk to Martin?
Am I?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's appropriate that I do,
Okay.
rather than this,
Okay.
he's the village attorney to
Gotcha,
give you
gotcha.
advice, but,
Yep.
you know, I have my lawyer that,
Okay.
you know, can probably talk to him, but.
Okay, I just wasn't sure whether you were in that position and ready to go, in which case then we would find out what he had to say, but I'm not saying, but I think
Yeah.
maybe it's appropriate what you're saying, that,
So, can we ask Martin to help us define the term hardship as it applies to this,
and I think you're right, Liz. I mean, I think you're absolutely correct, but.
I understand
But
that the questions are there. I have a few other kind of things, and I think I've put that on my list of things to.
I want, before you do that,
Yeah.
I just want to point out one other thing that is right in the law, because just to prepare you for what's going to happen, which is that in order to prove the existence of hardship, the applicant shall establish by documentary evidence. So that just says here that the burden is on the applicant, like you are asking us to grant you essentially an exception for your specific property because this law has caused hardship. In order to do that, you have to supply us with evidence that convinces us to grant that exception.
Certainly.
So, and you've done some of that, but we will ask you to provide more evidence.
Okay, what?
I wanna make sure that we have a clear definition of hardship before we do that, because we're just gonna go around in circles.
Yeah, so what's written right here says what it says.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
That's reasonable.
And Liz, when you're done, do you mind if I?
No, go ahead, Bernie,
Good,
please.
okay. It seems that after looking over the 3 criteria, that it basically may come down to figuring out whether this property is able to be rehabilitated and profitable, regardless of that you're out of the picture. It's just a question of whether this property can be made to generate an income, or if it's just gonna cost way too much to keep the existing structure going, unless somebody can twinkle their nose or, knows a magic verse, then, it's just gonna sit there and deteriorate because nobody's gonna put the money in.
Let me
It
clarify,
costs too much.
it's not an income, it's a reasonable return.
Okay.
So there's no part of the law that guarantees somebody can generate an income from a property. Mr. Parr may have purchased this as a private residence, he may have purchased it as an income generating property, but it is, we are not responsible, the government, i.e. the village of Cooperstown, is not responsible for making sure a property can provide an income or generate a reasonable return.
And it says return, not profit.
Right.
For a specific reason.
But it sounds like we are responsible to ascertain whether it can generate a reasonable return because we are having to make a decision based on it.
The hardship we have to consider is, has the historic preservation law prevented that from happening?
Well, if we're the historic board and we say, no, you can't tear it down, if it can't be, and it can't generate a reasonable return, then our historic law, by virtue of us saying that it can't be torn down, has prevented a reasonable return.
We have to, if we were gonna make that argument, we would have to look at not just the cost of rehabilitating, which is the argument for hardship in this package, but what is the cost for building something new on that?
True.
Can you build something comparable
Right. Yeah.
for that cost?
Yeah.
So, you know, that it gets more complicated, you know, if you're gonna follow that argument too.
True.
So
True.
you're not gonna tear something down and not build something else.
Right, right,
So you're
right.
going to
This is-
invest that
yeah.
money, whether the property is demolished or the property is rehabilitated.
It's true. It might be broken up into two parts, though. The first is to establish whether or not the existing structure can be made to generate a return.
There's no responsibility, we don't have to establish that though. Yeah.
And that's fine, but we should probably, it would be great for Mr. Parr if we knew what we would need for him to come up with in order to.
But we don't, that again is the responsibility of the applicant. We don't tell him what, he has to decide what's gonna create his case. And that's in the law too.
The property is incapable of earning a reasonable return. From the get-go, it was. I mean, it answers that right there. I mean, you know, it's like what it costs to fix it up compared to starting all over. There's two different costs. And
Why are they two different costs?
why?
Yeah,
Because working on old things that need to be fixed costs an exorbitant amount of money more than building brand new. And it's a fact. You can talk to any builders. We're working on stuff now, adapting new to old, and it just takes you so much longer. And labor is very expensive.
and labor to build the building is expensive too.
It is, but-
You can make the argument in both directions.
I do more building stuff probably than you do, and so I might have a little more experience in it. It's a lot faster and easier because building new stuff. Trying to fix old things is hard.
But as far as we're concerned on our board, we're not adverse to telling people that they're gonna have to work harder. And I'm not trying to give you a hard
No,
time,
I
but
understand
I'm
that, yeah.
just so you know, we give a lot of bad news in terms of people saying, well, this would be the easy way to do it, and we're like, no, you can't do that, because that means getting rid of the old and coming up and putting something else in there.
I guess when I said easy, hard translates into more money. So it's a cost.
Yeah,
The
okay, I
hard,
see
the
what
hard
you're
is
saying, yeah.
cost. So the cost of it is like on a little 2-bedroom house, you're gonna spend well over $300,000. I mean, on the thing, it's like, it's kind of ludicrous. You could never sell it for that. No way. no way.
Do you have a better, I'm sorry, Chris. Go.
But you
Well,
just
they could
tried to sell it for $227,000 without anything inside of it.
Well, why wouldn't you? You don't
You're telling me you
offer
couldn't
it
sell it for
lower.
$300,000.
I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Let's agree on that. I'm gonna put it on the market for $130,000, okay? I'm gonna call Ron, see if he'll list it. 130. Somebody shows up and buys it, gone. If they don't, what's the time? A month, 2 months? And if they don't, then you give me the stamp.
I think that's a really fair way to approach it.
So let's do it, right now.
Well, I'm not playing let's make a deal, I'm saying, asking you, well,
Sorry,
no, Keith, we're in a public meeting.
I know.
We have to move forward, not with a kind of a dickering kind of thing, but asking you to try to legitimately at 130,000 as you proposed, where the money you've invested into it, the cost of purchasing it plus the expenses you listed, 118,000, you're talking about a 6% broker fee. That takes you to 130,000, maybe even a little less. But if you're saying that's the number.
The numbers I gave you and what I put in, they're real.
I know.
I keep track of that. I don't write down
I'm
what I just
I'm not suggesting they
I'm
are.
pretty good on that.
I'm just
but
saying,
They're low.
to take some time to show that you have made the good faith effort to bind somebody to buy the house for the amount you have invested in the purchase of the property, and you're saying your total expenses, your sweat equity, and the expenses for what you've done, that's a lot more reasonable than saying you tried to sell the house, the only listing we have is basically $100,000 more than that. That is not a good faith effort, in my opinion, because the house next door to me just sold for that, and it's complete and intact with bathrooms and kitchens and functioning services, and that's in the village of Cooperstown, a couple of blocks away from the house you had listed. So I think a good faith effort is saying, listing written offers, documentation showing that you have offers or you don't have offers. But if you're doing it through a real estate agent, if somebody's
That's kind of legit.
if somebody's making an offer, even if it's not what you're asking,
Yeah.
you have documentation again that an offer was made. Then you have documentation of how that was responded to. That gives us that good faith effort to sell the property. You have.
Good faith documentation.
Right, and it
Yes.
covers the
So basically
documentary
what I
evidence
say
requirements.
is not believable. This is what I hear, and I hear like, we can, I'll do that, and then there's gonna be something else. That's how it feels.
And we don't not believe you. This says
Documentation.
The
good
law-
faith efforts to find a purchaser.
Yeah.
But if you asked Martin or any other lawyer to interpret good faith effort, they'd say there has to be evidence, there has to be documentation.
When you were reading the law, it said that
It says it right here, in
Documentation.
order
Yes.
to
Well, it says
prove the
good faith
existence
effort.
of hardship, the applicant shall establish by documentary evidence that, 1, 2, 3.
and
How much do I need 10 people to sign a letter saying I tried to sell it? I don't know how many though.
I think what
That's
she's
my
saying is
problem.
documentary evidence of selling it at a lower, at a
List
more
it,
reasonable.
go through the process of working with a real estate agent as a real estate agent would. If somebody's asking you about buying it, you say, it's listed with Ron Johnson, it's listed with so-and-so. Go ahead
I
and.
mean, isn't that what you were proposing? You were saying, look, I'll list
Yeah,
it for that.
I just want it, but I don't, how long are we listing it? 1 month? What are we considering reasonable? So
What
we
do
don't
you-
know that.
I'm gonna ask you what you consider reasonable.
I would consider reasonable, my reasonable is gonna be different than yours, because I wanna be done. Quite frankly. 1 month probably isn't totally reasonable. I would say a couple.
I would say I'm gonna let you determine, sorry. I'm gonna let you determine what you feel your tolerance level is. We're not here to dictate to you.
I'm
We're
not-
here to work with you.
I-
And we are following the law in trying to figure out what we need, what you need. You know, we're giving you the opportunity to continue to give us information that you feel supports your argument. Okay? I'm not gonna say, well, you have a month. I'm not gonna say that. You tell us the time you need to take to feel.
I'm not trying to pin you where I'm
No.
gonna spin and use it against you, because
No, we're not-
I've already proven I don't do that.
Yes, I'm
The
not
reason
saying-
I ask is like, because I don't want to come back and like, well, hypothetically, 2 months wasn't enough. I'm like, oh, okay, we gotta go over it. You know what I mean? I'm trying to avoid that. It's like, what's a reasonable return? I don't know what you think, I know what I think.
So the way this works is you present us with documentary evidence that you feel is sufficient to make your case. We can ask you questions about it, then we vote. What we're doing here is trying to help you by saying, we need more evidence, because if we vote, our vote right now might not be in your favor. So our job is not to help you get to the outcome that you want, it's to uphold the law.
I see. So is the only thing lacking at this time, is it the good faith effort trying to sell it? Is anything else lacking that I need to, I mean?
Let's look at the other criteria and really think about that. So we have notes here that we're gonna ask Martin to better define hardship in terms of the law as enforced in the village, since the village law is not clear what kind of case law is out there that he would refer to related to hardship.
Do you mind if I ask Mr. Parr,
Yeah.
what exactly do you feel that Martin might be able to clarify in your favor?
I think if he looks at this package, he's gonna say, yeah, you need to approve this, because push comes to shove, this goes to a legal thing. I think he's gonna realize he has to defend what's going on here, and I'm not saying anybody's being malicious, but I don't think it's gonna go well.
Because
I don't wanna spend the money on lawyers, but it just, gets to that point.
Because you've documented that it's gonna cost a lot of money, and you feel that Martin would be able to look at that number of what it would cost and say, there's no way the guy can.
Yeah, how
Okay.
am I supposed to be able to
All
do
right.
this?
Okay, I understand.
The house is gonna fall in a heap in that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
One way or another, right? That just seems.
But we don't want
sorry
the
to
house
hear
to fall in a heap.
But it's gonna,
Well,
it's gonna.
So-
Because I'm not fixing it, it's just, it's not, doesn't
and
make
have you
sense.
encapsulated the back? Have you sealed that up? That was open last time I looked at it.
The back, how'd you
Yeah.
look at the back?
We look.
Right, from where? From my property?
You have an application in front of us.
It doesn't mean you can go on that property without permission, okay? Chris and Miss Yancey asked us, sure, because they had interest, I'll take them in.
I didn't
Look
go
from the
in
neighbors,
the
that's
house.
fine.
I did not go in the house.
Okay, I'm just saying.
I'm asking you if the back has been sealed up and protected from the
It's
elements.
definitely protected,
Has it been sealed up?
it's protected,
Has it been sealed up?
it's protected, and it's none of your business, okay?
We have, and you can ask Mr. Tillapa about this, had other property owners seal their property. And we have also had the village seal properties when we're concerned about elements getting in and then build the property owners.
Okay.
So I'm asking you to make sure it's protected from the
It is
elements this
protected.
winter.
Ask Chris, he was there.
I was there, I mean, I'm not prepared to give a full report on every aspect of it, but I saw that the zip board was placed over, areas in front, and, it's not a permanent building material, but the coating on that will last for years. So even though it looks kind of unpleasant, I'm not worried that water is getting in there, but there are various gaps. There's daylight, you can see it, when the wind blows, when wet air blows, there will be moisture blowing into the building. And moist air will penetrate for sure, and, you know, like along the foundation, there are some gaps, there's places where moisture will clearly.
There's this much water in the basement right now, too. There's water. That's part of the problem.
Okay. I don't want to get in the weeds with you, Keith. We are trying to get you to the place you want to be, and we're trying to follow the law. But we are asking that no more damage be done to this structure
It's
either.
not.
So the reasonable return, regardless of whether return represents the most profitable return possible, and provided that the lack of return is substantial as demonstrated by competent financial evidence. I appreciate Dave's formula. I'm not sure if we look at the whole cost of all the work to keep this house standing and return it to functioning, or we look at the restrictions placed upon the property by local preservation ordinance to prevent the current or other owner from seeing reasonable return. And if we look at that, the cost is lower.
I'm not sure if all of the cost is lower yet.
If we're just looking at the aspects of the work that needs to be done to follow the preservation ordinance, windows, exterior finishes, those types of things. We don't weigh into the cost, electric, plumbing, interior,
So you're just talking about exterior,
yeah.
maintaining exterior
What
integrity.
good would it be to do that? It'd be a useless building.
But
You
the
can't fix
only
it.
part, the only thing we weigh in on is the exterior appearance of the building in the historic district. So if we're not saying,
That makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm not really following that.
No sense. It's a house to live in.
I think, if I understand, I think what you're saying is, say it costs, you know, the total, say $300,000 to get the house ready for renting. That's one cost one could look at, but if one was just to protect the house, you know, fix the outsides, keep it, you know, protected from the elements, so someone could buy it and just go and put up sheetrock where they want inside and finish out with the fixtures they want and do all of that stuff. That's a different model, like a ready to be finished out house.
Well, what I thought Liz was saying was that the one cost, and thank you, the one cost for a complete renovation as opposed to making the outside meet the historic preservation board committee, whatever we are, but I totally understand what you're saying, that kind of, it's hard to imagine how, not considering whether the cost of the getting the building to fruition would be justified and just concentrate on the outside.
because we're looking at the restrictions placed on the owner by the preservation law. That's what we consider.
But then is there somebody else that takes into consideration the, whether
No,
the
but-
property is a money pit and should be torn down because there's no way to make it return on it?
I mean,
No, this board oversees the issue of
I
demolition.
think, if, just so I'm clear, if somebody bought a property and they expected to spend $200,000 on it, but then they discovered like it was permeated with black mold that required nothing else could be used, one could say, okay, that's not a reasonable, to now fix this house up, you have to spend a lot more, that's unreasonable. But if you have a house which has a problematic foundation and requires $200,000 to work, even if it's a lot of money, it's not necessarily unreasonable. We know this house from the outset would require a $50,000 foundation job. That's, I mean, for me, it seems simple as saying, if we want to preserve this house, what does it cost to, the key thing is the foundation. That's the big problem with the house and it costs $50,000 to fix it, is that reasonable to ask someone to do that or not? It seems like a lot hinges on, the rest, you know, a lot of it can follow.
But we don't tell a property owner they have to fix their foundation. We tell a property owner they need to install or can't install a certain kind of window, or need to maintain a certain material for their siding as opposed to choosing a less expensive material. So those are the things, I understand what you're saying, but I'm reading what the state is saying. The restrictions placed upon the property by the local preservation ordinance prevent the current or any other owner from seeing a reasonable return.
I was just thinking of reasonable
Yeah.
return in terms of, like, is the price reasonable for the job that needs to be done? I was
Right.
sort of simplifying it in that
Right.
sense, I thought.
No, I understand, but I would think about what the.
The intent of the structure is to live in it. It's not a storage building. So
I understand.
you can't bring it to that, a reasonable livable condition. What's even the point in the whole thing? I mean, that's what it's for. It's a house, it's a living dwelling, and, you know, unfortunately, the foundation needs to be changed. You know, and it needed a lot of things. Unfortunately, they all kind of went to that extreme where it just costs more and there's more to it. And the numbers I have, when I was trying to get estimates, I was very honest with people that, hey, I'm trying to tear it down. I would like an estimate to support what I'm doing, and just give me a fair estimate. A lot of people don't want to do it, or you have to pay them. Give you an estimate, it takes a lot of time doing a complete estimate on that kind of house. So it's just more money sucking out of my pocket. And I do the best I can. I have some good numbers there. I could go out and find a contractor, get way higher numbers than that. Very easily, I could do it. And, you know, but the cost is what the cost is. And if you can't afford to do it, and it doesn't make sense to do it, why are we arguing about it?
I think I might be able to argue your point, for lack of a better way to express it. I understand what you're saying about as the board, we're talking about the exterior and so forth, but we're also, and maybe I didn't quite understand what you're saying about how we're in charge of demolition too, Aaron, but we're also the ones that grant or don't grant demolition. So just to say that we're responsible for making sure that the outside is historic, we're also denying a demolition as another route, so that's within our purview. So
It's the question of, is the cost of rehabilitating the exterior of the building what is preventing a reasonable return?
but is it actually saying that, or is it saying that our board is preventing?
Do the restrictions placed on the property by the local preservation ordinance, so the laws here, prevent the current or any other owner from seeing a reasonable return?
So the option to demolish isn't covered by the ordinance?
Well, that's, the option to demolish is something we can grant or not grant, and the demolition request was turned down. And that's why Mr. Parr is coming to us with a hardship request, because he is saying we have created he's saying he wants us to consider how much it's going to cost to rehabilitate this structure. When you look at the question of restrictions placed on the property by the local preservation ordinance so he is saying the restrictions prevent a reasonable return, but our restrictions only address the exterior appearance of the structure.
But not the demolishing of the building.
Oh, our restrictions address the demolishing of the building too, yes.
So wouldn't our ordinances restrict his ability to demolish and to make a profit off the property? Okay, I understand what you're saying, that they're sort of separate, but it seems to me that
But we're not responsible for him making a profit off the property.
I'm just confused by when you say that it would be the exterior of the building that would be the cost that may be prohibitive, for his, being able to do the project. Our ordinance is relating to the outside of the building, but our ordinance is relating to demolition could be interpreted as causing him to not be able to make a go of the property and make it happen. So I
But
guess I'm just
our
unclear.
ordinance is to protect historic contributing structures in the historic district. So the hardship is not on whether he can make a reasonable return. Hardship is on the building and its preservation or maintenance, that it continues to exist. I know we're going around in circles, Bernie.
I probably don't understand, but I just hope that you understand my misunderstanding.
I understand what you're saying,
Perfect.
because if you look at the whole cost of everything, you say, oh, wow. But if you look at the cost that this law ordinance imposes, windows, trying to find the list.
Siding,
Siding,
front stoop, the
front-
foundation.
right,
Well,
It just
the
becomes very-
foundation really doesn't count because you can't see it from the outside, you don't control that, right? So that doesn't count.
Right.
So it's a paint job, maybe the windows, that's about it. So it's not much just to make it into a shed. It's supposed to be a house. These rules are not supposed to encumber people from making things better and torture them. It really isn't. I think we ought to run this whole package by
Okay.
Martin.
A few more questions, Keith, before we agree to pass this. So we have things covered. I think we've asked you this before, but have you looked into the rehabilitation tax credits available, the state and
Yeah,
federal tax
I have.
credits?
If you don't live there, okay, you gotta go back to the land value, basically, I forget the wordage of that. So basically, the land value is the value of the property.
So not
You
as,
can't get any assistance.
there isn't a tax credit as a rental property, as an income, I think there are
There's
tax.
just stuff, well, I
There's
don't know.
tax credits for commercial properties, and there's actually more tax credit available to you for commercial properties.
No, the things I read that you gave me, it wasn't much meat on the bone, if any,
Okay.
in my opinion.
I think there are some significant tax credits available, even if you're using it as a rental, an income producing property. Dave, did you have something to say about that? So, and we're talking 20 or more % of the cost of the project. So,
It doesn't help you up front, you know. You
but
gotta
it
come up-
it does over that long-term amortized,
Right.
kind of perspective of reasonable return, have a big impact. That's kind of, would be weighed into some of what Dave is talking about. Even if we're talking about the whole amount you are saying it would cost. So I just wanted to ask that. We've kind of ruled out that other than a residence or a multi-residence property, we've ruled out that the property could be adapted for another use by the current owner or purchaser.
I'm gonna check that one off. That's number 2, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that one's good.
So it is because of its zoning, as you have indicated yourself, there are ways to, if you wanted to make that investment, and that has been approved, to create an more income producing than a 2-bedroom house, based on what they've been approved for. Keith, I think that one of the things, and Aaron alluded to this, we have to ask Martin about helping us to better define hardship in terms of case law, right? So you have a better understanding of what that means, and you can think about what else you might give us related to that. And we've talked about speaking to a real estate agent, listing it at a more kind of reasonable reflection of the money you have put into it, and seeing if you do get offers. And I'm going to leave that up to you, but that documentation is important, to show written offers, to show you have declined or accepted written offers.
Liz, I apologize. Did you, were you suggesting that Mr. Parr, if he has access to case law that might support his position, that might be something that he might avail himself to?
We're asking Martin to clarify from his perspective, hardship
Okay.
in terms of case law, because
Okay,
Keith would like a better understanding.
I wasn't sure if you were asking Keith for something to support
In
that.
terms of what a reasonable return is, right, that's the key question we're asking.
I have,
It sticks in my mind that what is a reasonable return?
Yeah,
and I have defined hardship as the question too. So also, what is a reasonable return?
Now, when as and if this property sells, not only is there gonna be a real estate commission, but there's gonna be some closing costs too. I'm guessing there's probably $4 or $5 grand of closing costs.
Well, that's for Mr. Parr to determine in terms of, we're not
Well, I just-
articulating.
You know, we're talking about what's a reasonable number for
But
you to list it.
But,
Of course, we don't do that.
right,
All of
and-
those things
I
have to
think
be
you told me
considered.
that what I listed before is not reasonable, but we can't come zero in on what is. How can you tell me what isn't, but we can't kind of go, probably this much is?
Well,
know what I mean?
if you don't mind me
I can clarify why the listing evidence that you provided appears to be unreasonable.
Okay,
It's that the listing price was not reduced at any point during the listing.
no, it's not.
Right.
No.
And I would also like to point out what Aaron pointed out, how we would love to be able to give you some exact numbers, but the way we function as a board is that we get information, and then as a group, we vote on it. It's not one person who has a clear-cut criteria and they tell you what exactly they need. That's just not the way we're set up, and I apologize. I understand.
You're absolutely correct.
And I understand how frustrating it may be, but I think that was well put, the way Aaron tried to point that out, that's just not what we are.
in addition, the law reads that hardship application procedure, the applicant shall consult in good faith with the board, local preservation groups, and interested parties in a diligent effort to seek an alternative that will result in the preservation of the property. So I know that you have made efforts to sell it, and you also made a broad brush statement at the last meeting about giving the structure away. If you come up with creative solutions other than selling it that will preserve the structure, whether it's in place or not, I think it is fair to say that you could come back to the board and talk to us about a solid plan to do that.
So does that, preserving the structure, not on the site it's on?
Right.
How about outside of the village?
I think we would prefer that it stay in the village, but I'm asking you to come to us with a solid plan, a plan for what, when, why, and how, so we can then make a determination.
The only reason I ask, for just broadly speaking, because to come up with a plan, it takes me a lot of time and it costs me money, and it just goes boom, gets blown up. I get very frustrated.
I
I'm trying
understand.
to say, if a plan, it possibly could be outside the village,
I didn't hear the last thing you said, I'm
Like
sorry.
if it's an option, it can go over into Hardwick. I have property in Hardwick, I could put it up in Hardwick, on my property. And I could come up with a solid plan, but it's gonna take me time and effort and money, and if it's not even a feasibility, please just say so now, and we'll just drop it.
And the,
So if you could put it up in Hartwick, why can you not put it up on the lot that it's on?
And the lot it's on,
Right, that's the
Because-
question.
that's a good question, I haven't even thought of that. Pretty much, well, you could, but I would not use it as a house. It'd be the shell like you're trying to preserve.
and that's what the part of the plan that wouldn't work for me. Because when I say a solid plan, it would be a kind of contingency, like if you were proposing to move the house, whether you were doing it or somebody else was, the ideal would be to keep it in the village, in the Glimmerglass Historic District.
Sure.
Because it is still a representative example of a unique type of architecture in the Glimmerglass Historic District. So although it weren't in situ where it was built, it would remain in context in the district. That would be the ideal.
That makes sense.
But this is what I mean by a solid plan. Can't say, yeah, I found somebody to do that, or I'm gonna do it. It goes away and it never gets put up. And vanished, finito, gone. No, a solid plan that kind of triggers then when it gets put up, when it gets moved, when it's successfully rebuilt, then your development option of the property is triggered.
So people lie sometimes. I can't,
Well, no,
I think the same way.
I think we have to be
No, that's
clear
reasonable.
about if then this, and
It wouldn't be back as a house, because the original thing is making it into the liberal house is just, it doesn't make sense.
That's
for
a
you,
big-
it doesn't make sense.
That's a big difference between saying that the foundation's not good and this, that, and the other, and saying this house, even though the shell is in good shape, even if the foundation was good, this is just not something that can be, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I think you gotta watch if you're saying that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess what I meant to say, the whole package and putting all that into it, it doesn't, mathematically has to work, because I have to pay for it. And unfortunately, I don't have a huge resource of
But-
money to pay for that. At the end of the day, it's gotta be a
not you
house.
It's not you that has to pay for it, it's somebody,
Right.
an owner.
That's what the
A
law
property owner.
says.
And I happen to be the owner at the time, so if
No,
I can't
right.
sell it, that would seem to me to say it's not, no one's willing to do it. That would, my assumption, but I just,
So, but consult in good faith with the board, local preservation groups, and interested parties in a diligent effort. If you want to come out the other end with this lot to do what you want to on it, you make a diligent effort to find a way to make sure this structure does not get destroyed. That's what this is saying.
Do you mind if I make a comment?
yes.
I think what Liz is trying to say here is
Thank
that these are the things that would make it so that you could
Get to where you
get
want
to
to
where you
be.
want to be. These are conditions where we would feel that we're discharging our duty as members of the board. She's just trying to,
And not just us discharging our duties, but following the law. This is written into the village law. And making sure we have, and you have made every good faith effort to maintain a piece of historic architecture, a significant example of architecture in the village. I know you feel like it's junk. One man's junk is another person's treasure. And there is value in this example of architecture. And we would like to find a way to help you get to where you want to be and to preserve this. So I'm just saying there's a broad spectrum from listing it and seeing if you get somebody to buy it, working with the board, local preservation groups, and interested parties to see if there's an option, maybe not you, because you've already said it's not worth it to you, to make a plan that this structure has another life, not as a shed, as a home.
Do you have a copy of what Liz is
The
accessing?
one from the Parks and Rec, no, I don't need a copy of that, I don't think that's valid.
The village law?
I
This
have
is-
the village law.
Okay.
Yeah, I learned how to read, so I know that one pretty good now.
So this is,
Just-
I
The
mean,
thing, what I understand is like, if I try to sell a house, what we all think is a reasonable price that satisfies that. I do not understand what, in good faith, trying to work with other groups and the extent of that, I have no idea what that means whatsoever.
Well, I think Liz is approaching it from different aspects. One would be, if I understand you correctly, about selling at a reasonable, you're talking about the putting on the market for
If we
120. Yeah.
put a price tag,
Okay,
I
yeah,
think
so that would be one aspect of it, but another is Liz is letting you know that if you are able to manifest or make happen some of those aspects that she's talking about, these different things that she's reading off to discharge her duties and to feel good about what she's doing as a member of this board, that you're gonna put yourself in a better position overall, because from our aspect, from our point of view, we can say, okay, you've done everything that we've been asked to make sure that this person could do or possibly do to be able to make it happen for you. So, you know, you may not understand those things or think they're important, but
They're in the
things-
law.
They're in the law, and we have to, we look at, Liz is
we all took an
confident enough.
oath to uphold the law. We got appointed and took oaths. And so we have to follow the law.
I have a question. The last item about finding another party that would be interested in preserving the building, that requires a good faith effort, that he make those calls, talk
Let
to
people
those
know,
people,
let people know that it's
let people
available.
know that it's available, and a reasonable time elapses, and there's nothing, then he has made a good faith effort. Is that the understanding?
Yeah, but again, some written documentation.
Yes, got it.
So like even things like public, I'm posting notices or somehow advertising that that if you, and I'm not saying this is appropriate, but if you had documentation that you tried to spread the word somehow that this building was available and what you're trying to do, keep it within the historic district, that would be helpful. I'm sorry.
It's fine, I was just thinking about the timeframe where did it come up that if Mr. Parr wants to put it on the market for a certain period, we would have to know how long the period is in order to establish when the next meeting is.
Right.
So before we end tonight, we have, right, we should
Right.
figure out. a
And,
date.
and also we need to figure out a date, because the other aspect of the law requires that hearing regarding demolitions or hardship after demolition be held. So the law requires that a public hearing be held where you can get people to come and speak on your behalf, and people can come and speak against the proposed hardship demolition. So that is the next step in terms of what we have to
That
do.
one we had didn't count.
Now, that was the demolition hearing for demolition.
Yeah.
Now hardship triggers another hearing,
But no, what the original application was the hardship clause for demolition.
but it
That's what
wasn't,
it said on the paper. the
was that a
applicant-
public hearing, Chris?
And we had a public hearing for that.
We did have a public hearing,
The application was for that specifically. It was
Okay.
quoted
Yeah, but I don't
the
know if
law and
there's any-
everything right in it.
whatever I'm saying.
Was the public hearing noticed for the hardship?
I don't know if it was specifically, I mean, we had a public hearing
Regarding,
regarding demolition, but it was for a hardship case, so I think that's
Okay.
sufficient.
I apologize, we've checked that
There's been a
box.
lot going on, I get it.
There's a box checked, yeah, there's a lot going on, that's for sure, that's great. So now, what Chris was saying is to identify, I think you have to think about, are you going to talk to a real estate agent about listing it for X period of time? How many months? And then when that, either you come to us and say, I've sold it, you come to us and say, I have worked with, in good faith, a group or an individual to seek an alternative that will result in the preservation, and this is the plan. If that happens before you sell it, great. But I don't know if we can determine tonight, I think it's up to Mr. Parr to talk to a real estate agent and determine how long it gets put on the market for, and to start using his network and spreading the word about coming up with another plan while it's on the
Can I ask
market.
a question? So are the, like, estimates to rebuild it, to make it a livable structure again, do they seem legitimate, like they're not false, it's legitimate stuff?
They seem legitimate to me, but I'm not an expert.
I think we'd have to ask Martin about that.
So do you think we could take the packet, give it to Martin, get his assessment on it, and say if I've met it or not, to help you guys make a good, honest decision?
Well,
I think we are proposing to take it to market.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it's a legal thing.
We are a board working on the law, so we're part of that legal matter. It is something we will talk to Martin about, but, so defining hardship, what's a reasonable return? We can ask him, in his opinion, about the legitimacy of the estimates. That does not get us to number 3, which is good faith efforts to find a purchaser interested
Well, it
in.
might, I met with Chris, Mr. Yancey.
No, good faith
that's
efforts with
not good faith.
documentation.
But he's sitting right there, he can tell you. Why does it have to be documented?
Well, you're talking about good faith efforts to sell
It
this.
has to be
Yes.
documented
Are
because
you
the
talking-
law says it has to be
It's
documented.
being documented by being recorded.
No.
Are you talking
No.
about the selling
No, well,
price?
Chris and Mr. Yancey.
But that's
came-
not,
I mean, it
it's
is
very
good
different,
faith.
it's very different to say, hey, do you wanna buy it, versus putting it up on a, with a realtor where anyone can go and, I think that's what they mentioned,
understand
that's
that.
a document, and actually documented.
Evidence
Right.
of those
So reasonably,
processes.
so if I walk around like you like when you're going to run for office, you get somebody, you write down
No.
the date and the person's
Nope.
name,
Nope.
who I tried to sell it to, is that good enough? Like,
I think we're talking about a realtor. Did we
like
switch?
trying to sell it to you, if I write down, on this day, I tried to sell it for him for this much. If
I think
just
we're
write
talking
that
about listing with a realtor and
Yeah.
then just showing that it was listed
down.
with.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I
you
think
did or
that's-
didn't get offers. If you got offers, the paper trail of what that negotiation was, as you would if you purchased a property, or made an offer on a property. So that is still, despite the other questions for Martin and some clarification, that's still something we're gonna leave to you to decide how long you're going to work with a realtor to attempt to sell the property, and how long you're going to follow section H3, which is consulting in good faith efforts with the board, local preservation groups, and interested parties in a diligent effort to find an alternative solution. That is where Chris is saying, when do we revisit this?
Does
So-
right now count as consulting the board in a good faith effort to find something different? Does that count?
And interested parties and preservation groups.
Right, but the board part, it says board.
Continuing
Does this
to work with us in a good faith effort is part of it, but there are ands in there as well.
Right, I got the and,
So-
I'm talking specifically the board.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you've been working hard with us. I applaud your
So we got that
patience.
one. All right.
Check. There are lots of boxes to check.
Do you mind if I
Go
ask
ahead.
quick? So you list first of all, I'd like to say, you kind of popped off with the number 120. I mean, I don't think that you should be rushed into anything, if you, I don't know, wouldn't feel comfortable if you go home and you're like, this wasn't, I don't think that you should necessarily be held to that. I would hate to think that anybody, making a decision like that So just to let you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, I think that you should sleep on it. I think that's great though. And then the second thing would be, so we're saying that if you find a buyer and you sell the house, then you walk away and you're done with it and
You'll
you're.
never have to deal with me again.
Okay, well,
That'll be a blessing for all.
Stay at Markway.
Nothing
Okay, I just
personal,
wanted to clear-
Keith.
And then one other thing I wanted to mention was that, and I hate to question your wisdom if it is that, but just in my humble opinion, if it were to be listed for a month or two, I don't know anything about selling houses, but a month or two doesn't seem like a reasonable
Why don't
time
we-
period.
I think
okay.
one of the
We see
real
it- we
estate
see number
agents
3.
quoted that an average house is listed for 121 days in this area.
Okay,
So that's 6 months. That's up to you.
No, wait, that's
Back when
not
I listed it for 3 months.
Is it
it was
121,
3
4 months? Sorry,
4 months.
math. I was an English major,
So,
They can look it up, they can look up the average time of sale.
yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Right now, it's
I
gonna
would-
be a lot, cause things aren't selling real good.
I would recommend that you work that out with your professional authorized real estate agent and take their advice.
and actually, if there's one other thing I could add, I hear what Mr. Parr is saying about how this does come down to some legal terms, and the last thing I want to do is burden you with, any more fees, but if you have a lawyer friend, I think I would talk to them, especially if in your opinion it comes down to legal definitions, because if there is a difference of opinion, then it wouldn't hurt to have what they have to say in their learned, words to contrary to what
But
you
if,
think it is.
yes.
I'm not sure what a lawyer friend is. Do you have a lawyer or a friend? A friend does not put his hands in my pockets.
They're your friend, right?
We're not discouraging you from getting your own counsel. The village's attorney will have some wisdom on some of these things. I think he would probably encourage you to get your own counsel if you felt you needed it, but we will ask him for some clarification. And we want to see this structure survive. We are willing to work with you on how that happens and be creative about it. So that's why I've tried to lay out a range of options for you. So let Chris know how long you're gonna list it for, once you've spoken with somebody.
You know what, let's just vote right now and be done with it, get to the next step, okay? Can we do that, please?
But the board is saying that you haven't met the criteria.
Then vote and vote no, please. We'll just go to the next step. No, this is kind of ludicrous, it really is. I mean, I'm trying, I put a lot of work into that, it costs a lot of money to do all this. The good faith thing is not in good faith. I've never lied to you, I am not.
We're not saying you've lied to
This
us.
packet, the last meeting we're in, this packet, you dropped on my lap and applied and said it was a law from the state we had to follow. Your attorney said it was not. And you did it to my wife. She's disgusted, she won't even come back here. So it kind of, excuse me if I'm a little upset, but I don't like being treated that way. And I was gonna save it and throw the hand grenade back in your lap the next meeting, game would have been over. But I brought it to Chris. Chris does what he says he's gonna do, and your attorney reviewed this and said, no, you can't do that, it's not a law. They also said with the engineer, you can't make somebody pay for an engineer that you want. He also said that, I've been told that a number of times. But I went and did it
Martin
with John
said that?
McManus. Yes, Martin did say that. So, there's some things going on here that, in good faith, I didn't throw this back in your lap, because game would have been over. You would have missed your time frame. That's why you offered me the meeting ahead of time, because I would have won. So in good faith, I didn't do that, because I've been trying to do this above board. I wish I would have let that big tree fall in the house. 2 years ago, argument would have been over.
You don't think there were anybody here who's in bad faith?
None of us.
If there is a mistake, and I don't know that there was, but you don't think there were anybody's trying to.
Yeah, I from where I'm sitting, it's just like, more. I tried to sell it for a lot of money. Somebody can make an offer. You don't sell a house for less or low price, you put it a little higher, and you try to make a little bit more money on it. There's no offers. No one's like, yeah, we want to tear it down. I'd be like, look, this is what you gotta do to do it. Probably won't happen. That's your call. There's no offers. You know, it's not like to whatever, but we don't sell it. There's nothing coming in lower.
But do you understand what we're saying about how we are responsible for having something written, something knowing that it was posted with a reputable real estate person for X amount of money, and then we can say, hey, you tried to sell it for that. I mean,
I do have that. It was listed for the average time of market, and there was no offers. 2 or 3 people looked at it. I actually met with one couple. They looked at it twice. The money wasn't the problem with them. They were, nah, we can't do anything with this. So it was listed.
but it wasn't listed at the price that we've been discussing recently. And I understand what you're saying about how you ask for a little bit more, and then people come at you with an offer. But I hope that you can understand that
It was a high price. I know exactly what you're saying.
I hope that you understand that we can't say, well, you know, people come at you with a counter offer and he didn't get a counter offer, therefore wouldn't sell at a lower price. I mean, I can't make that jump. I understand what you're saying and I understand the logic, and that may be right, but we can't say, well, you know, it was listed at a higher price, but it couldn't have been sold at a lower price because he would have gotten, I mean, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable making that.
Documentary of it. I've been trying to sell it. I can sign a document stating that. I'll swear to it on the Bible. I mean, I gotta write down stuff every time I talk to somebody trying to sell it. It seems a little ridiculous.
No, but do you understand what I'm saying about how we wouldn't be responsible for us to say, well, it would have sold at a lower price because he didn't get offers at a higher price, and they would have counter offered at a lower price, therefore wouldn't have sold at a lower price.
I get it, but we're not real estate agents either.
That's
And
why
like these
you
numbers
get
in
one.
here,
Exactly.
it's like, this is what it costs to fix it. Those are real numbers. And it's like Ron Johnson's thing. He's a real estate agent. Basically says it's a piece of junk. It's not worth fixing. You won't be able to sell it. He says that. He's a real estate person. I'm not. So they say all this stuff, and I'm like, wow, how much more do we need? It's gonna go on forever.
And Keith, let me
I'm gonna
clarify
die of old
something.
age.
Well, we're all volunteers here too.
I understand.
And we are doing our best. We are doing our best to care for the village of Cooperstown, which we all live in and care very much about. We are doing our best to be very fair to you. So I'm sorry you felt misled by that document. That information, because our law is so sparse, I was told by the State Historic Preservation Office to give you a copy of the model law so you had a better understanding of hardship. So I did nothing to intentionally mislead you.
Okay.
And I presented it as the New York State model law to give you an understanding of the hardship process, because our documentation in our law is not well kind of layered and defined. But because what you're saying and what you've alluded to could trigger lawsuits, when you go to case law, which is what a lawyer you hired and the village lawyer would be looking at, they would be looking at cases that were settled based on those state and federal laws. So I was trying to give you information that would give you the foundation to build a package of materials for hardship that would create, give us the documentation we needed for our law and would make it seamless. So I just want to clarify that. I did nothing nefarious by giving you the state law. I did it on the recommendation of the State Historic Preservation Office when I said, how do I explain our very kind of sparsely stated law to this applicant for hardship? And they said, give them the model law. So it spells it out more specifically. Okay, so I want to be clear on that. And I am very sorry if you felt misled. And I'm very sorry that if you've spoken to the village attorney and, he said not to pay attention to that, I did what I was told by the State Historic Preservation Office, which is the office that audits us and makes sure we're upholding the village law and doing our jobs, okay? So we're all trying, and we're not trying to torture you. Most of us still work full-time also and come here and sit and talk to people and do it because we care about maintaining the properties in this village in their character. And so we understand that you work, we work too, we prepare for these meetings and get nothing. You have an economic interest that you're trying to protect. We respect that, but please don't suggest that we are doing anything inappropriate, because we're not.
Well, from where I sit and how that was presented, and to be fair, how I hear things is not always totally accurate. So I did watch the tape again, and I was wrong about a couple things. But I called the state up also, because I'm trying to figure this out. And this is something you can use to build your own law, but we have to follow our law.
Right.
It doesn't matter what this is, it doesn't matter
Okay.
to say, well, this is it's
But it
what
gives
our
you
law
more-
says and what the definitions here
It
say.
gives you more context. So if you are choosing, which is what you have implied, to have us vote, and I can't speak for the board, but you have implied that if your hardship case is turned down, your lawyer will take care of it. There is a certain level of precedent in state and federal law that will inform that process. And that is why I gave you the model law of the state, so you could understand it, okay? And that, I did not mean to mislead you,
Let's just call it a misunderstanding.
okay?
Can we do that?
I was really truly trying to help you to prepare,
I
okay?
didn't take it that way, but let's just leave it as a misunderstanding if we can.
And as these meetings never get shorter, I apologize for that to everybody. Jay?
So where are we?
I don't know, because I'm hesitant to do what Mr. Parr has asked, which is to vote, because we have not determined that the hardship application is complete, because we don't have information about good faith efforts to find a purchaser interested in acquiring the property, which is one of the 3 criteria. And as defined by the law, that is documentary evidence regarding good faith efforts. We've also defined several questions we'd like clarified by the village attorney. Though that is where I would stand. If somebody else feels strongly about making a motion, but, well, among the residents of the village of Cooperstown who have been sworn under oath to support the law of the village, so it would be somebody.
It seems to me to be wise to not be hurried into a vote.
I agree.
We have a process, and if we feel that we need more information, then that's how it least works.
Right.
I would abstain because I don't have enough information.
I'm just wanting to make sure there's no, like, time clock that's ticking. Do we have to? make
We
sure-
haven't determined that the hardship application is complete.
Okay, I see.
I agreed to extend it, so
I understand. I just wanted to make sure we were
Yeah,
covering all bases and
pull that.
not,
Yeah,
But we have Martin review it, see what he says, and then we can.
Do you mind if I put something else out there to the general public here that's probably already had way too much? I'm wondering if there is a way, as Mr. Parr suggested, that if the costs were at a certain level to rehabilitate the house and we agree on that, I think I understand what Mr. Parr is saying, then you could bypass the realtor, because nobody in their good mind would be willing to buy the place if we know that it's gonna cost way too much to rehabilitate, and I guess I just want to let you know that I understand what you're saying, but I'm just not sure what to do with it. I understand what you're saying, but I don't know how to process it. I don't know if anybody else understands.
I understand what you're
Okay,
saying, Bernie,
great.
but I don't agree with it.
All right, okay.
And I go back to we can't assume that this isn't gonna be valuable to somebody else as it is. And
Okay.
somebody else is not willing to make that investment.
So there's a chance that somebody might say, hey, I really like this house, and I would be willing to put that kind of money into it. I understand.
I won the lottery and
Yeah,
this is my dream property
I-
and therefore I'm just going
Okay,
to, I'm
all
going
right,
to
no, I
move
cannot
forward.
say that that would not happen, so it's a possibility, and it would be great if it did, and I guess that's what we're hoping. If the place goes on the market and somebody buys it and has their eyes open and they do buy it, then that is that person that hopefully is willing to put that extra money out into it.
Okay, does that kind of answer your question, Jay?
Oh, hell yeah.
Do either of you have?
We don't know. That's
So
the answer.
do we table this? Is that
I
the procedure?
think we should have Keith tell us, once he consults a real estate agent, how long he is going to take to try to list it. And we determine when you will return based on that.
To list it and/or alternatively to move it,
Right,
either way. But
right.
that's the time.
To work with other interested
Other
parties
options,
to,
right, sure.
yeah.
Can I ask a question here? All right, so he lists it. Okay, he lists it for X amount of weeks, okay?
X amount of ways.
Or
Weeks.
Weeks, X amount of weeks. 4.3 weeks to a month, X amount of weeks, okay. He makes effort to talk to organizations that might be interested in having the building to preserve it. Okay. He comes back in that time frame and he's got nothing, except some documentation that he tried to sell it and that he approached potential interested parties in preserving it. How do we document, how is it documented that he approached the interested parties?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily the case that the board's asking to have, written notes about conversations. I think listing it with a real estate company would probably satisfy the board that a reasonable,
Well, there
attempt to
were
sale
two
was
things
made.
there. There was the reasonable,
But the law is the.
the good faith, and the good faith to sell it, and the good faith to have somebody else move it and preserve it.
Right,
Yeah.
that is not the law, but it's part of the that is not one of the 3 criteria, but
Okay.
it's part of the procedure. So applicant number 3 under H, the applicant shall consult in good faith with the board, which you have, local preservation groups and interested parties in a diligent effort to seek an alternative that will result in preservation of the property. So this is the procedure to meet the criteria. So showing that it was listed with a real estate agent would help meet, that's the criteria,
That could move the dial.
right?
Okay.
But you were asking about contacting other than the realtor.
Right.
How do you prove that? And I would suggest that what I would be most impressed by is if somebody like Liz, who is knowledgeable in these areas, was consulted in terms of who would be appropriate potential, like who could give information on that. I don't know if you know people or boards or whatever, who could be potentially contacted. Email those people, see what they say, show a
Write 'em a letter.
documentation stream, write them a letter.
Right.
But emails are great because, you know,
And to answer your question, if you did speak to somebody and make a verbal offer of the house, I think writing it down to add it to your package would only help. It's
Go a
not-
step
I'm not
further
saying
and send
it's
them
of
a
no value.
reverse letter.
But-
Based on the conversation we had today where I offered to give you this property if you would
Right.
move it, you weren't interested. Thank you
Right.
for considering it. That's documentation.
but certainly contacting people and having a written record of that is nothing near the force of having a realtor listed.
No, these are two things, list it and
Right.
Find alternative means of
Preservation.
dealing
and
with it.
find alternatives. List it and make a good faith effort to find alternatives.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
So, you know, the reverse letter
Right.
could
Okay.
possibly satisfy the good faith effort. I talked to every church in town, offered to give it to them for a rectory.
I mean, as long as the proper people were consulted who are in the know of who to contact.
Right.
As long as you,
The person with ostensible authority to say yes or no.
no, but I mean, to figure
Not
out.
the guy living under a bridge, hey.
No, but I mean,
nice
to figure out
place.
who to contact, that you wouldn't wanna, I mean, I would wanna know that you contacted somebody in the know of people that you could contact.
So
To
you
generate
could-
your contact
In order to do that, you could contact the State Historic Preservation Office, you could contact Otsego 2000, you know, who could
All the
have a
above.
conversation with you about other uses of
Who-
historic properties.
Who might be
Yes.
interested.
Yes, and they may be a very good person, a very good resource to contact is Otsego 2000. That would probably be a good place to start.
I'd go with
So-
Craigslist.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, you can use
Facebook.
Craigslist, you can use Facebook, you can, you know.
Celebrate Cooperstown. So just some suggestions about how to put it out there.
Okay. Sign in front of the house.
Whoa, old
Okay.
school. Yeah, I think,
And they say,
can
yeah,
you
but we got it.
communicate to, Chris, once you make a decision about how long this, how big this window should be?
Yes, I definitely will.
Thank you.
And we will do our part in the meantime of reaching out to, the village attorney.
Yes.
And I just to be very clear, although I'm sure you've heard this before, because I've heard it in other situations, the village attorney represents the village.
I
And
understand.
although he's a super nice guy, he represents the village. So he's, you know, he's got one client,
He does
it's the
not have
village.
dual agency.
Correct. He does not represent me as a resident of the village personally. He represents the corporation, Village of Cooperstown.
I understand.
Do we have a good idea of what we want, or what Mr. Farr wants in terms of answers from Mr.
My
Telepaw?
list includes define hardship, provide more evidence of hardship, and what does it mean to provide more evidence of hardship? Now, again, over and over again, it says it's up to the applicant to define what supports their hardship case. And that in the model law may spell out examples of things you might submit. That was one of the reasons I gave it to you, because the model law did kind of list examples of things that have been submitted as evidence of hardship. Clarify what is a reasonable return with respect to this. And you wanted Martin to weigh in on whether the estimates are legitimate. I can't guarantee whether he will do that, but I will tell him you requested that.
I was asked just to quickly review the whole packet to see if it satisfies the hardship or not, like just a blanket yes or no in a sense, because to me, it did. To you folks, maybe not.
But
everybody.
it's the board's decision to determine that, not Martin's decision to determine that,
It provides
because,
the legal interpretations to help guide the board, because you are civilians, you said, and this is not your full-time job, and we do the best we can. And they're smarter on legal things than we are. That's the only reason I inferred it.
But just to clarify, Mr. Parr wants to know exactly what he needs to prove this, but you're saying that.
The law very clearly states it's up to the applicant to determine what
So
they give us.
I just want to, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep, the
So-
burden is on the applicant.
It's up to me, but it's up to you.
Yeah,
They'll tell you what ain't, but you gotta figure out what
Right.
I
is.
mean, we
Well,
don't, we're following the law as vague and as mysterious as it is too, and trying to figure that out also.
If
So-
you've ever watched regulation or law come together, it's like making sausage. Like watching someone make, like often, someone will watch someone make sausage and they'll never eat it again.
Yep.
You know, I've sat on numerous Cal
Thank you,
OSHA
Keith.
advisory boards and the Citizens Advisory Board, and it's brutal.
Yep,
It's brutal.
makes this look like a walk in the park, right?
Not exactly, but
Close.
easier than that. I wouldn't characterize it as a walk in the park or a day at the beach, but it's considerably less arduous than,
It is the good, hard work of democracy.
well, democracy is not terribly efficient. It's messy, but it's the best we got.
And you probably want that information from Martin as soon as possible.
Whatever it's reasonable.
Yeah,
This
but-
doesn't go anywhere fast, I don't think.
Well, I think we'd all like to be able to say we've gotten past this, so, you know, we're gonna do it on your timing, but we're,
Okay, thank you.
okay?
I will contact Chris, we'll leave that, then we'll decide
Okay.
how we're gonna proceed, is that
Okay,
fair? Okay.
you can kind of determine what the pace should be.
And just one last thing, for me anyway, you had a suggestion in terms of people that could be, or both of you had suggestions in terms of those that might be in the know of who could be.
Yeah,
The New York State Historic Preservation Office or Otsego 2000. And their office is right next to the farmer's market.
Otsego 2000.
yeah, and, I will reach out to find out who at the Historic Preservation Office might be most helpful, Keith, so you're not making a blind call.
I've spoken to him
Okay,
already, so.
Okay.
I do have some contact.
you have spoken to somebody there.
Yes, I-
Okay, okay, thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you for your
Happy
time.
holidays.
Happy holidays, thanks, Keith.
Good night.
Thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you for your patience with me.
Okay, so we have,
Chestnut.
should we be reviewing that without the, did they say to go ahead?
I'm sorry, not one.
Not one Chestnut,
No,
but
I'm sorry,
Leather Stocking
leather
Street.
stocking, 3 letters.
Yeah, 3 Leather Stocking. So,
I can sort of lead off the conversation on that since I live on that street and it was not difficult for me to wander down there and look at it. But I just opened my mouth and I'm not prepared. Hang
it's
on.
okay.
I do have some questions about the application. The application needs to let us know which windows they're going to be replacing. They said 9,
10.
10, okay, but the house has more than 10 windows. So they didn't say which of the windows they're talking about.
I'm sorry, I should, if I'd known, I would have clarified with the applicant. When he first called, he ordered 4 windows for replacement, but then he said, hey, I really want to replace all the windows in the house. I want to upgrade all of them to wood, modern wooden windows. So he wrote down 10 windows. Basically, I said, hey, if you're going to do more windows, don't just ask for 4, because that's all you've ordered right now. If you're going to do them, he said, well, I should do 10. So I can tell you more clearly, his intention is to redo, but he only asked for 10.
Right, so the house has like 20 windows.
Are we
And
sure we
they're
need
all-
to know?
And they're, yes,
Okay.
because they're all different sizes and they don't match the description that you provided.
And I do also, when we're clarifying, I will say this, if we're gonna go back to the applicant for a specification on which windows, I know people feel like I'm replacing the windows, I want things to be matchy-matchy, but there was a reason for the windows on the lower level to be 2/2. And I think if he's replacing historic windows and he knows that they were 2/2, they should be replaced with 2/2 if we approve this application.
Also, the windows are not in poor condition. They're in fact in really excellent condition, especially the ones on the front of the house underneath the porch,
Right,
which
I
have been
think-
protected from weather.
Right, but one could, if one wants to, one can replace decent windows if you want to get like a, you know, Marvin two-ply
Sure.
glass, all of the, you know.
But we want to
Requirement to be-
discourage the kind of random replacement of windows that are operable and in good condition too, in terms of, you know, there's no reason to do that, even if he feels others
Yeah,
need to be
usually there's some
replaced.
rationale for why
Yeah.
the windows need to be replaced.
Yeah.
So how does Chris make that?
So he can say, please tell us, you know, show us examples of the conditions that exist that would warrant the replacement of specific windows. Because people have come in with pictures of each window showing us, you know, rot and irreparable or really kind of long kind of rotting stuff. And even then, we've given them a hard time.
So we will deny if it's not justified.
Right, we
Okay.
have.
They can't
And
see
just
it.
out of curiosity, what is the 4/4 downstairs, better visibility?
So it was a sign,
It was more expensive.
yeah, it was more expensive to have a bigger pane of glass, so you put them in the public facing, you know, and then the smaller panes were usually in the lesser rooms. And, you know, so you had the 4/4 toward the street and
Right, it was
the,
also, it was, you know, new technology, really, you know, it was harder to make a bigger piece of glass. So it was newer. So if this house, I didn't look this up, but, so when this house was built, it may have had, you know, 6/6 throughout. It may have had 6/6 only on the second floor or only in the back, because let's not, you know, we're gonna put our big bills on the outside
we're
of
gonna
our
show
cash
off on our,
flow, right? That's,
I'll be more impressed now when I.
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Thank you.
So and also I will say that there's multiple kinds of windows on this property. On the parking lot side, so on the east side, there are sets of 4/4 with a mullion. So you can't replace those with a 6/6. Like, it's a completely different organization of windows.
Right, so I know from speaking with him on the phone, his thought, he liked, there were 6/6 in many places, and he just thought, I'd like to just do that everywhere, and we would advise him
Not to.
not to, that we want to have the 2/2s downstairs.
Yeah, you should keep it appears that all of the windows that have not already been replaced are original to the structure, and so he should keep the light division that exists if he chooses to present us with an application.
You should.
Do you know anybody who works on them?
No,
I think,
he could go to the Window Preservation Alliance website if he's interested in restoring his windows, as a national nonprofit.
and the replacement, if he is going to prove that they need to be replaced, should be in kind in terms of the division of lights, and so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just so I'm clear, just for future reference, if these are, you know, single pane windows that you know, cause a higher heat bill, say, and he
Get
said,
some storm
I
windows.
want to use these 2-ply Marvins with argon gas,
Get some storm windows,
that, okay.
which would have been appropriate to that house.
And they already had, it's already got storm windows.
I see some, yeah, on the
And-
east side there.
Probably in his garage, right?
You know,
Yeah.
and it's
Just wanna be clear.
the cost of doing business in an old house. I mean, you learn to put up your storm windows or pay somebody to do it, and, you know,
Okay,
if they're operable and not compromised.
So we would need not just a picture of rot, but we would need to know percentage of rot. Like, I've had this in the past where we see a picture of rot, but really what
Right.
percentage?
Well, each window, so show us, you want to replace that window, show the conditions. You want to replace that window, show the conditions. I know, I mean, so much of what we're dealing with now is people thinking they saw it on HGTV. They don't even realize they've been brainwashed by HGTV and everything has to be nice and new and match. And you know, we have to try to remind people that we have to really respect the fabric that they're dealing with, not just think it's gonna be better if it matches, or if it's gonna be better if it's new and matches, or whatever, so.
And these were, you know, these buildings were built to be maintained, not to be replaced, which is, we're used to things we buy in the store have a planned obsolescence, and then we buy another one, and that's not how these buildings were constructed.
Okay.
So,
I think
got your lecture,
was your friend Linda? Thank you.
yes, Linda.
I couldn't get the words out correctly, but I tried to point out about the whole idea that if we could replace a building totally fake but exactly looking the same, it wouldn't be the same. I mean, it would, we'd walk by and we'd be like, that's a replica. I mean, there's a, and I don't know how to express that, or I don't know how to justify that, but I know that there is a gut feeling that you get toward things, and
Yeah.
it's not the same when things are plastic.
Right, or even traditional materials.
Even
You
for
can
people.
still, there's still a difference, so that's it. And, yes, and I forwarded a few training options from Linda too, that are creeping up, but, there are webinars that are like an hour and a half, so, if anybody's interested, take a look at her email, the emails from her that I forwarded. I'm sorry, I did not forward them until today, that was my fault. So, Chris, do you have enough feedback, or do we need to
Yeah,
give him
that's
more
fine.
feedback? Aaron, did you have anything
I'll
else?
talk to him.
Okay, but real kind of evidence,
Yeah, I think I just jumped the gun.
I know.
saw
Well,
wooden
no.
gardens, this is easily easy.
no, well, not,
I know,
Yeah,
there
yeah,
are other
it's so good.
factors.
don't forget,
Right, there are other factors.
we put everybody through the ringer.
That's right.
So I would like to, I'm unclear on aspects of the fence proposed in item number 1, so I really think we have to wait until somebody comes to talk to us.
Okay, is there anything, if I call or whatever, meet with her, just, is there anything I should be looking out for? To me, it looks like they're
Are
extending.
you talking about one chestnut?
Yes.
Yeah, one system. There are stone pillars and metal fence.
Well,
I'm gonna
And my
replicate.
question is, at what intervals are the stone pillars? So, you know, where she gave us an existing drawing, an image of what exists, could it be drawn in? You know, how far apart the pillars are gonna be, where they're gonna be placed. And then I wasn't clear on the height of the stone, I'm assuming it's gonna carry over, but it wasn't clearly stated, the height of the stone footing and then the fence height. So a clarification on that in the application, I want to make,
Yeah, I saw it would be
Okay.
the same.
yes,
Right.
but
we want to put that explicitly stated. So
yeah,
we
you know, I know
what
she
we're
shows
voting
us what it is, but, you know, say somewhere it will be carried over as is in the original. I you know, want to assume that, but I think we should ask them to
on. This is
articulate
what
it.
she says, the existing, she shows pillars are 20 foot on center. But it doesn't,
But they
it doesn't
should-
explicitly
There's
state
51 feet, so
Right,
show us how that's
how
gonna,
the math will work out.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
is there gonna be one at each end and one in the middle? She says 3 pillars, and then they're not gonna be 20 foot on center.
Does that count as the one with the one that's already there, or
Yeah.
count as one?
51
Right.
divisible by,
I know, don't get me
but then we have 17 foot gaps, not 20 foot
Right.
on center.
So if you do them, yeah, we
Yeah.
need to know, so.
Okay, that's great. I will ask her.
Okay.
What was the first part that you asked about?
Put 2 of them at
I hope Chris wrote it down, because I can't remember.
The height, is it the
The
height?
height.
of this now?
And the intervals of the stone pillars, and so the height, assuming that it's gonna carry over
As the
from the
wall
existing,
and
but,
fence gonna be the same as.
yeah. And
what
is that, I
exists.
did not go and eyeball it, is that flat, or is there gonna be a variation in base? You know, because there's a hill there, so is that where the hill is or not?
Yeah, I think maybe we have a specific question about how they're gonna resolve the end of the fence and the grade.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Sounds great.
Um,
I
minutes.
have a question about the fence on the Susquehanna property.
Mhm.
Is that,
Yeah, that one, it's well known, we're working on it, but,
okay,
there are multiple issues. The fence itself is a problem, but also the owner put in a driveway-like structure. I don't know if you've seen this.
oh,
But
is
there's
is
now-
it where he drives on the curb
Right,
cut
which isn't
for the-
legal,
Right,
which is, and he put a concrete pad, so, if he's going to successfully put in a driveway in that property, it's going to have to interrupt the fence. So maybe the fence will be altered or removed anyway.
I had noticed some tire tracks on the curb cut,
Right,
but I thought that was just like a temporary,
no.
oh, I just got it,
driveway
like
is-
get into the back of my property to drop something off and, okay.
Yeah, there's a new
got it.
driveway designed to use that pedestrian area, which is not.
Chris and Mitch have been working with
Yeah.
him.
Got it,
so-
okay, thank you for the update.
But it does affect our fence.
Okay.
And I'm working on that property owner contact information still for you.
Loving good.
Yeah.
Carl.
Yeah. And-
Yeah, I've written him, so we will see. Maybe he'll write back. Snail mail.
Minutes.
Who's the, is it
it's-
Mark or?
It's Mark R. Lowengut.
Yeah,
Got it. If I see him,
yeah.
I'll say something.
Yeah.
I've seen him twice at the farmer's market.
Right,
But
okay.
Probably
I
catch him
will-
on Saturday mornings, yes.
Once I ask him, he'll probably actively.
Hangs out by the farmer cheese.
It's good.
It's really good.
I'd hang over there.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh,
And-
Minutes.
Yeah,
Minutes.
minutes, sorry, I kept thinking, okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I have one correction.
Yes.
I am a Mrs. or a Dr. Richardson. I'm definitely not a Mr. Richardson.
Oh, I'm sorry
It's
about
okay. It's important.
That's your
It's
husband.
important because, you know, that's,
Yeah.
yeah. He doesn't want us to.
I know that, as it says in that document, that going through a hardship process is not easy. So thanks, everybody, for trying to hang in there and keep it somewhat not going in a circular motion. And
Well, thanks for taking the brunt of that.
everybody was in this together.
You definitely call it a hardship process.
Yeah, hardship is right.
I have a question.
Yeah, I can, I have Christina. Okay. Yes.
Item 6 regarding 5138 Averill Road. I voted because Dave,
Recused himself. Did we miss that?
yeah,
Thank you. Okay, so Jay voted in item number 6.
which brings me to a question. According to Robert's Rules of Order, it's my understanding that for the alternate to vote, a regular member has to be completely absent. Is that correct, or are we doing something different?
You know, I'm not as fine-tuned in my Roberts rules, but in my experience on this board, we ask the alternates to attend the meeting in case a regular member is not here, or in case a regular member needs to recuse themselves.
Good enough.
And that's, in the 12 years on the board, because there were architects on the board, because there are people, it's a small town, we've always operated that if somebody needs to recuse themselves, the alternate steps up.
We have precedent.
Yes,
Okay.
lots of it,
All right.
okay? So again, I can't guarantee it reflects exactly what Robert's rule says, but it is definitely precedent.
Good enough.
Oh,
Adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
Oh, accept the minutes.
Oh,
We have a
accept
motion
the
to
minutes.
accept the minutes with, as corrected.
So moved.
Second? Pat, thank you. Bernie? Whoever.
Yes, Aaron.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Liz votes yes, aye. boy. Thanks,
Now
everybody.
do we need to adjourn?
Yeah,
Motion to adjourn.
second,
Does anyone want to stay?
no, sorry, love you guys, but thank you all for doing that
Not
meeting
that
with
much.
Linda, though.
But not
I
that
need
much.
dinner, I've had a long day.
Oh, man, it's been very long.